Chapter 897. Liang Lu, Luo Nan muttered this name, muddle-headedly becoming an eliminated person. He walked out of the testing grounds, giving off the feeling of a walking corpse. At this time, every soldier's standard AI automatically accepted a new mission. It controlled the combat suit and connected to the omnipresent magnetic rails within the base. This allowed Luo Nan to advance towards the target area without touching the ground. Explosions rumbled from time to time, assaulting back and forth. Some of the waves were extremely heavy, so much so that the entire passageway would sway with an earthquake-like impact. This caused Luo Nan and the surrounding soldiers to sway from side to side. Fortunately, the magnetic rails maintained their basic stability. No one was injured. It was just that within the vision of Luo Nan's left eye, the new mission provided a simplified map of the base. The surrounding routes were endlessly smeared with red signifying malfunctions. Some were directly erased, so much so that the already planned and established routes were adjusted once. Such a change reminded Luo Nan that the game scene he was in was indeed a dangerous zone. At the same time, the scene before his eyes seemed to have already exceeded the scope of a normal dream, fantasy, and simple data splicing. There existed an internal logic that seemed to be real. Luo Nan was unable to distinguish it clearly. Questions constantly lingered in Luo Nan's mind. As he walked through the strict laws and the depths of the wartime base, the corresponding puzzlement continued to proliferate endlessly. Of course, there were also some small and exquisite doubts that were conveniently solved. This should be the relay station, no doubt about it. Luo Nan's thoughts were corroborated by the base's simplified map after the new mission was activated. The relay station that the stern-faced Sergeant Major spoke of was most likely the same as the one Luo Nan's thoughts were referring to. This was also the test location where Luo Nan needed to repair and upgrade his defensive barrier during his offline testing. Luo Nan hated that he couldn't swallow and digest the structural diagram of this base and the test location. It could be said that he had a deep memory, so he was able to recognize it very quickly. But there was still the same question. Was this a borrowing of existing data, or, Luo Nan really wanted to pull out the virtual brain system and orient it to the lamination interference technology section? He wanted to find the author column and compare it with the target character marked on the new mission. He wanted to see if this Liang Lu and that Liang Lu were the same person. Yes, there were many people with the same name in this world. Just speaking of Luo Nan alone, there were probably hundreds or thousands of people on Earth who shared the same name as him. If the scope was placed in the vaster civilized world, then Luo Nan wouldn't be considered to be anything special. What Luo Nan truly paid attention to was the operational logic of the Innerverse simulator, as well as the nature and depth of the data it utilized. The time for Luo Nan's imagination to run wild passed by. Luo Nan's game character had already followed the established rules. He ended the short-distance movement and arrived at the location marked by the new mission. This place had a name that was very demoralizing to young people, Second Logistics Support Area. At the very least, this was the result of Luo Nan's Primal Chaos translation. But in reality, Luo Nan saw the scene with his own eyes. It was so busy and clamorous that it made one's brain boil. After checking his identity and passing through the interdistrict passageway, a buzzing sound that was like a swarm of bees entered his ears. Luo Nan really did see a swarm of bees. There were countless floating individuals, including soldiers like him, and all sorts of mechanical constructs. They shuttled back and forth within the enormous complex space that clearly had divisions. They were like worker bees bustling about inside and outside a hive. This space itself was undoubtedly a beehive. There was indeed a hemispherical beehive building that was pieced together from countless hexagonal blocks in the central region. It was just a visible part of the material plane. Inside and below it, there existed various regions of the relay station, including a complex network of pipes that connected to the core. At the same time, it was a complex creation that was interlaced and stitched together by the local spacetime and spatial faults. There was astonishing energy being transmitted and exchanged in all sorts of forms at every moment. Similarly, it also required an astonishing amount of personnel and machinery to carry out maintenance and adjustments. Luo Nan already knew about the former when he took the exam. As for the latter part, it was a concept that he had just formed. It was also at this time that Luo Nan's consciousness unavoidably pulled away from the game mode and the exam scene. He merged into this more personal experience. He was certain, even though this was a virtual scene, it was clearly filled with flesh and blood. Luo Nan raised his head, lowered it, and turned his head over and over again. It was too much for his eyes to take in. He also knew that there were at least 3 other similar beehive nodes within the relay station. This included a backup energy unit. Luo Nan's design of the enchantment started here when he was offline for testing. Well, speaking of the current structure, Luo Nan's mind didn't stop. He had already set up his combat suit to carry him along the preset route. He soon reached the target area and removed the maglev navigation link. This was an office area built on the outskirts of the beehive node. It was called an office area, but there were all sorts of complex equipment placed inside and outside. Some of them were still processing or printing objects with a hissing sound. Correspondingly, there were many kinds of virtual scenes erected in great numbers. Colorful rays of light interweaved together, and human figures flickered back and forth. It was so dazzling that it made one's eyes pop out. There were also clamoring shouts that were hard to hear outside. Rather than calling it an exchange of commands, it felt more like the venting of emotions. Luo Nan knew from this that the people running around inside were deeply immersed in battlefield mode. Their emotions were extremely tense. It was probably due to this empathy that Luo Nan and his game character subconsciously sucked in a breath of air. Only then did they continue walking inside. No one paid attention to this pawn with access privileges. Luo Nan walked all the way to the center of the area. He found an extremely recognizable voice amidst the rumbling noises. Hui District Node 77. You guys still have the time to debug a core component failure. Switch switch switch. Earth wave orbit. Did the 4th team all die there? Move towards the bottom. Don't mention robots to me. I'm using you guys to fill in the trenches. Point 22. The data package has been sent over. Expand accordingly. Don't make a single mistake. Luo Nan followed the voice and soon discovered a person in the middle of dispatching tasks. This was a 3-meter-tall giant. His skin was a bit gray. He couldn't be considered outstanding in this place, but his voice was exceptionally loud and clear. It was eye-catching. Could this be Liang Lu? Luo Nan really admired this person. He could see that the tasks this person was repeatedly dispatching were only an extremely small portion of the tasks at hand. The majority of the tasks had long since been handled through his fingers and even his thoughts. If this was all there was to it, then artificial intelligence could do it as well. It might even be more efficient. But from the current situation, this person wasn't just distributing tasks. More importantly, he was giving technical guidance to the maintenance personnel on the front lines. Even though there were a few superfluous words and idle chatter within the emotional clamor, every sentence was straightforward and efficient. The direction was clear. It made people feel that if they did as he said, they wouldn't go wrong. Looking at the feedback, this was indeed the case. In this way, what level of parallel processing did the brain have to reach? What level of technical expertise did one have to reach in order to have this kind of ability? Luo Nan noticed this person, and this person also noticed him. This person's bloodshot eyes stared over. You're standing here. Are you preparing to take a funeral photo? Luo Nan's game character stood at attention. I am Liang Lu, this is your soldier. Take him away. Ha! Luo Nan's mind flickered, and a tall and skinny person scuttled out from the side. He was approximately 190 centimeters tall, and he wore some sort of goggle-like observation device. Only half of his face was exposed. His skin was quite white, but his lips were pursed. He had an extremely capable and serious appearance. "Yes, field officer. Newbie, follow me." Unfortunately, he stuttered, and the remaining half of his white face turned red in an instant. Luo Nan. Chapter 898. In any case, Luo Nan had already found Officer Liang Lu, the target of the mission. It seemed that Liang Lu wasn't too difficult to get along with. Actually, Luo Nan didn't really understand why the sergeant major had sent him here before. But the officer who gave the orders seemed to be of a higher rank and had already made arrangements. Luo Nan was happy to continue following the plot. He wanted to see what sort of arrangements the Innerverse editor or his own subconscious would make. Luo Nan glanced at the proficient officer once more. He obtained the officer's name from the auxiliary AI, Xingzhan. This name was quite odd, but he really was a capable character. "Newbie, keep up. If you don't want to take the long way around, we need to hurry." The AI received a message broadcast just in time with Liang Lu's reminder: "The interruption station has entered level 1 war mode. The power supply to non-essential areas will be cut off. The soldiers' corridor will be shut down in 30 breaths. The auxiliary magnetic rails will be shut down in 120 breaths." Luo Nan knew that the breath was the basic unit of time in this interstellar civilization. It was roughly 5 times the Earth's standard second. 30 breaths was around 2.5 minutes. Liang Lu said, "The officer has already made arrangements. We'll be returning to the 2 Hives room to conduct your induction training there. If we can enter Tunnel 3 within 10 breaths, we can save around 70 breaths. We'll even have a bit more time to familiarize ourselves with the business." Luo Nan's game character gave a proper salute. "Yes, Officer Liang Lu." Liang Lu was quite satisfied with Luo Nan's response, but he didn't maintain his arrogance towards the end. The corner of his lips perked up. "There's no need to address me so formally. I'm not an officer or a noble. I'm just a rank 2 officer right now. I've only been in the military for 50 weeks. He took off the goggles on his face as he spoke, revealing a delicate and pretty but ordinary face and a pair of pure black pupils. There was practically no difference between him and a normal Earthling. Luo Nan still didn't know whether this was the result of the data splicing or if Liang Lu was like this in the first place. He didn't waste his time thinking about this. Instead, he researched and converted the 2 different time units. The extraterrestrial civilization he currently resided in used a concise decimal system for time units. Apart from the basic breath, which he didn't know the basis of, the minute, hour, day, week, quarter, year, and other scales were all in decimal scale. Of course, Luo Nan didn't have the leisure to care about those proper nouns. These units were the result of crude translation. Some didn't actually have that meaning. They were just forcefully corresponded for the sake of neatness. This decimal system caused the time represented by each level of units to vary in length when compared to Earth units. The 50 weeks that Liang Lu mentioned was about 9 to 10 months in Earth's time. Indeed, he was still a newbie. It was no wonder that he still looked like a student. It seemed like he hadn't been trained enough in the military. Luo Nan gave his evaluation here, and his game character maintained a respectful attitude. He followed along, quickly merging into the spacious and empty space outside the hive. After a few turns, he entered a certain tunnel. The moment they entered, there was a slight sense of spatial dislocation. Half a second later, they came to a big tube with a diameter of more than 100 meters. According to the authority, they were assigned to a specific invisible magnetic track and were rushing forward at a speed of almost 100 kilometers per hour. In front of him and behind him, the people whizzing past from their respective tracks were all people like them. At first glance, it seemed chaotic, but in fact, non-armed personnel, armed soldiers, and those who were carrying heavy equipment were all separated into different categories in an orderly manner. Moreover, some of them suddenly teleported out halfway and disappeared without a trace. Clearly, they had some kind of spatial teleportation effect. Luo Nan knew that this was the most convenient channel to connect the relay station's local spacetime with the underground core's half-plane. With the current level of technology on Earth, such a design that could distort the normal structure of space could not even touch the edge of it. Back when he was offline, he had reconstructed the defense array in order to take care of the spatial relationship between the two of them. It had given him a huge headache. In any case, Liang Lu's calculations were reliable. They arrived at the inner area of the two hive before the fast tunnel closed. This place was already a relatively independent demiplane. Compared to the base, outside, that was being attacked by powerful enemies, the demiplane was much more peaceful, and there were no frequent explosions. It was just that the level of bustle and noise here was not inferior to the command room just now, but also somewhat different. At this very moment, Luo Nan's eyes and ears were filled with various colors of paint and the sound of metal striking against metal. Within the complex and accessible space, there were self-propelled types, absorption types, and levitating types. There were also various mechanical creations that twisted and turned on conveyor belts. They continued to shuttle and push forward, converging into a majestic flood of steel. They were endlessly transported in from the outside, but it was unknown where they were going. This is our combat mission. Liang Lu raised his chin. We need to get these fellows to operate again. Most of them seem to have no problems. Luo Nan relied on his own judgment. Liang Lu sneered, they don't have any problems by themselves, but thanks to a certain arrogant fellow, all of them have problems. Luo Nan blinked his eyes. Let's not talk about the problems first. According to Liang Lu's words, could it be that they had to repair all of these tens of thousands of machines? Don't be nervous. First of all, you're just a newbie. You're just here to help. Second, there are many newbies like you. Third, these days won't be long. You won't need to add to the chaos when the reinforcements arrive. Lastly, believe in Colonel Xing and my arrangements. They will absolutely take care of your current level. Liang Lu's words made the newbie Luo Nan feel a certain power of retribution. Liang Lu felt that Luo Nan's words were quite amiable. He continued with this tone and encouraged Luo Nan, I just looked at your data. You are one of the first batch of naturalized seed talents to pass the 100-year sequence after Calamity Era. Even though there was a gap of several thousand years before you, and no one had much experience, everyone continued to follow the standards of Zhang He's era. It's true that your grades are severely biased, but you still have quite the standard in the field of configuration. Of course, you're biased to the point that it's like you've skipped an exam. You can only display your abilities to the fullest extent in a technical post like us. Luo Nan heard many specialized words in a row. Things like Calamity Era, 100-year sequence, naturalized seed, Zhang He era. There were some he was familiar with, but there were also some he was completely unfamiliar with. The unclear meaning of these words continuously severed Liang Lu's explanation, making it hard for Luo Nan to understand. This was the disadvantage of an immersive experience. Luo Nan nearly reopened the virtual brain system's information window to see if there would be a proper explanation inside. And at this time, the area where the two were located lit up with red light. Liang Lu, who had been speaking with confidence and composure, shut his mouth a bit earlier. He frowned as he received the external information. Chapter 899. Luo Nan's eyes widened as he observed. He was thinking to himself whether or not the simulator had begun a certain storyline. But Liang Lu didn't say anything until the end of the communication. He just made a few settings on the metal wall beside him, and the flashing red light in the surrounding area quieted down. Officer Liang Lu. I told you not to be too formal. You can call me Officer or Liang Lu. Liang Lu revealed a smile once more, but his brows weren't as bright as before. Luo Nan asked him, "Is there a mission?" "Lieutenant Officer Xiao has also been hit. He's next door. This time the internal maintenance of the hive will be troublesome. Luckily, it's not the front lines." "Hit? This isn't something we can handle. But don't worry. Lieutenant Officer Sheng will be back soon." Liang Lu responded, but soon his face turned serious again. "Relax. You need to concentrate. The military isn't a place to satisfy curiosity. Time is tight right now, and opportunities are hard to come by. You can't just casually fool around." "Yes, officer." Luo Nan's game character had a proper attitude. Liang Lu was very satisfied with this. He continued to introduce their future working environment. "Don't look at how few living people can be seen here. This is the operating axis and data center of the entire relay station. From the basic construction, pipeline paving, energy conversion, surrounding terrain, and even space-time structure. There are also the designs of various modules, vehicles, and armor. All the basic information is here. With this, you can theoretically build a relay station from scratch and make it operate independently. It can be said that with the land in hand, I have the base." Was the plot arrangement of the simulator this rough? Luo Nan suspected that the simulator of the inner verse was making some sort of secret peace with his subconscious. That was why the simulator was able to lean the game plot in this direction. Of course, Luo Nan wouldn't refuse this. It was true that he had seen a portion of the blueprints during offline testing, but it would naturally be better if he had the chance to review and compare. Liang Lu raised his eyebrows when he saw Luo Nan in a daze. "Do you feel that the quantity is too large and that it's hard to do?" It's actually very simple. For someone like you who has a foundation in configuration design, you just need to familiarize yourself with the blueprints and practice. Your level will rise very quickly. Once you're familiar with it, you can assist Lieutenant Officer Sheng. Of course, it's just running errands for now. Everyone has to pass this hurdle." "Yes." Luo Nan's game character was still the template of an outstanding soldier. He answered in a straightforward and efficient manner. Liang Lu, on the other hand, found it hard to stop the moment he opened his mouth. "Yes, the current situation is a bit more serious than usual. As you can see, we're being attacked by the servant army outside. The damage rate of all kinds of equipment is very high, and the pressure is great. At the same time, we have to eliminate the negative effects of a certain arrogant fellow as soon as possible. You have to be prepared to shed a layer of skin." Luo Nan had already heard Liang Lu mention a certain conceited fellow twice. It was hard not to be curious. He forgot that he had just been warned and subconsciously asked, "Who is that?" It was obvious that Liang Lu was just putting on a show earlier, but he had forgotten all about it right now. Overwhelmed by his emotions, he put on an obvious muscle movement and said, "The guy who came to help repair the defense arrays without bothering about compatibility at all and left a pile of sh*t behind. Why does it sound so familiar?" Liang Lu soon shook his head. "This problem isn't something you can touch right now. Trouble can't be solved just by talking about it. Right now, we're going to do the preliminary work. Speaking of which, you haven't implanted a dynamo core before, right?" "Huh?" Liang Lu answered his own question, "Probably not. You're so young. But we're going to do a similar operation in a bit. Relax, it's a temporary external model." Liang Lu walked forward as he spoke, and Luo Nan followed behind him. But his train of thought was a bit disjointed. Wasn't it good to implant a dynamo core? Luo Nan felt that there was a lot of information involved, even though it was clearly a normal conversation. He could only do his best to digest it. And at this time, he heard Liang Lu's drawn-out voice. "War makes everyone pay a price, but the Empire won't easily ruin the future of the young. Even if this era isn't friendly to us. Luo Nan couldn't see Liang Lu's face right now, but he could feel Liang Lu's suddenly depressed mood. He didn't know how to respond for a time. Liang Lu's voice continued. A psychic talent. It's a pity that you didn't live in the Zhanhe era, right? I often think this way as well. In this era, the Heaven Abyss spirit network of the Hongguang galaxy is practically warped and polluted to the point of extinction. It's completely supported by the Jade Crystal Array. If you leave its coverage, you'll choke to death with a mouthful of poison. But the outside isn't much better. The cloaks of the gods crisscrossed and covered me. I don't even have the space to breathe. The only way is to crawl under their feet like a dog. Rather than that, I'd rather take poison every day. Luo Nan still didn't know how to respond. He couldn't help but think of Her Majesty Empress Wu's judgment at this time. He combined the two together, and his mind became a bit suspicious. It was unknown how many times these thoughts came to mind, but they struck his nerves once more. Was everything that happened before his eyes what he thought about during the day, what he dreamed of at night, or was it reality in a certain sense? Luo Nan unconsciously chewed on those words. The psychic side has no future. Why are you so dejected? Some words can just be ridiculed a few times. How can you take them seriously? Liang Lu slapped Luo Nan's shoulder. He deliberately put on a show. Colonel Xing is also on the psychic side, but he's still a first-rate teacher. He's a master in both configuration and deployment. His Highness praises him. If it weren't for war, you wouldn't be able to work under him just by passing the general education exam. You'd have to be a specialized cultivator at the very least. What's more, the Heavenly Stairway students taught by him can form a platoon. Liang Lu rambled on about how much he admired Colonel Xing. Then he brought Luo Nan to the so-called Dynamo Core Debugging and Installation Department. This place was pieced together from the basic worker bee grid. According to Liang Lu's introduction, the worker bee grid was the most important basic structure of the hive nodes. It was a relatively independent module that could be pieced together at will. There were over 44,000 of them, and the vast majority of them operated automatically under the control of the core intelligence. Even in wartime, they only needed 100 people to maintain them. However, because of the godly operation of that self-righteous fellow, the operating pressure of the second hive node, as well as the other two hive nodes, had increased dramatically. The logistics department had already filled in all of its manpower, but it still couldn't make ends meet. Therefore, recruits like Luo Nan, who weren't suited for the front lines and had relevant knowledge reserves, were first assigned to this department. Currently, the Dynamo Core Debugging and Installation Department was assembled from less than 10 worker bee grids. The area it occupied wasn't large, indicating that business was bleak. Luo Nan was the only customer that could be seen. Under Liang Lu's guidance, Luo Nan's head was facing downwards. He was in a special operating position, exposing the weak back of his head. Even though Luo Nan was in the game, it was hard for him to avoid awkwardness. He was simply like a criminal who was about to be beheaded. Chapter 900. Liang Lu was very familiar with matters related to the debugging and installation of the Dynamo Core. He gave Luo Nan a suggestion as he adjusted the machine and instruments. You must open your eyes wide. Of course, I'm not asking you to stare at me. Right now, you need to connect the auxiliary AI with the scanner. I will grant you the relevant privileges. Right now, you need to concentrate and remember the results of the scan of your body functions. The peripherals of the Dynamo Core are replaced quite frequently, but the state of a person's body functions are different every time. If you want to be perfect, you must do a solid job of collecting basic data. Some superficial data can be taken care of by machines, but deeper things must be grasped by oneself. A mental database must be established. Otherwise, one cannot be called a qualified creator. Yes, the words above were said by a Colonel Sheng. Artisan. Was this a specialized profession? Luo Nan's mind was filled with doubts, but Liang Lu had already taken the first step to express his astonishment. You have a built-in reactor. Do you need it this early? Oh, it's a night level. Luo Nan, who was lying on the operating console, subconsciously raised his body for a moment. He controlled himself half a second later. This was the first time he had exposed himself ever since he seized this so-called night-level colonizing basic biochemical reactor. He just didn't expect that this first time would be in a game setting. That's right. Based on the information and data he had stored and collected, the simulated game setting would not be strange. It would not be strange for his background to be completely emptied out. He was just scaring himself. Plus, the mode of chaos simulation seemed to naturally be able to rationalize all factors. Liang Lu quickly found a reason for this situation. The structure is relatively new, but it's a defective product. Where did you get it from? Is it legal? Have you registered it yet? Yes, it even has a built-in layout function. Electromagnetic direction. Liang Lu found a registration entry that even Luo Nan didn't know about. He went, oh my, twice, his mood fluctuating. Speaking of which, you're quite wealthy. You're a night level. Even if it's a damaged night level, it's still a night level. There are only 2 Spire nobles and 10 titled nobles in this base. Luo Nan's game character responded, equipment and title are different. It's different. But for equipment to sink to this level really makes people jealous. Logically speaking, without the strength of the celestial stairway, or an endogenous spirit core, it would be impossible to activate it. That's right, you're only using it as an auxiliary equipment to be activated by external devices. What a waste of God's gift, what a waste of God's gift. Liang Lu had long forgotten what she was supposed to do. She looked at the structure and data of the night-level biochemical furnace on the scanner. She was both envious and jealous. She clicked her tongue in wonder. She hated that she could not turn Luo Nan over and properly dissect and research the region of Luo Nan's cloak. In the end, Luo Nan had to remind him, Master Liang Lu, the dynamo core. However, Liang Lu even had the thought of giving up halfway. If I still implant an ordinary dynamo core with a night-grade reactor, then that would be a real waste of God's gift. Liang Lu was, after all, a cultured person. He quickly realized his unprofessional behavior and coughed twice. In the end, he still could not help but say, I'm sorry, these words might not be very appropriate. Can I take a photo as a souvenir? I mean, can we keep the image of the structure and do some follow-up research? Of course. Luo Nan still hasn't figured it out. It was unclear whether or not the Liang Lu before his eyes was a product pieced together from information. But he always felt that the night-level endogenous basic biochemical reactor and other alien civilization creations that he had received had some sort of property relationship with the higher life forms of this civilization, especially those that were related to Earth. As long as the other party had good intentions, he did not mind returning the object to its rightful owner in this manner. Liang Lu did not know of Luo Nan's evaluation criteria, but he was overjoyed by Luo Nan's permission. After obtaining Luo Nan's permission once more, he downloaded all the information related to the reactor from the scanner. Then he patted his chest and said, I will definitely research it properly. I will not fail you. I will strive to restore this treasure to its original state as soon as possible. I didn't entrust it to you. Luo Nan was speechless for a time. And the recruit before his eyes was already full of motivation. He operated the surrounding instruments and equipment with more than double the enthusiasm. The words that came out of his mouth were 10 times more than before. I still believe that it will be very hard for an ordinary peripheral dynamo core to display the potential of your night-level reactor. But right now, don't bite off more than you can chew. If you really can operate this reactor, then Sergeant Major Mail will most likely enlist you into the frontline defense force. Speaking of which, if you have the support of an external device, how long can you last? With the external neuron, why would he need any external devices? It was just that the structure of the electromagnetic muscle membrane wasn't up to par. The material craftsmanship wasn't up to standard. Luo Nan had consulted Dean 1 on this topic, but there was no response for the time being. Luo Nan used the average time taken in combat to respond, 20 seconds. He originally wanted to say a minute and a half, but he changed it to the unit of time here when the words were on the tip of his tongue. Liang Lu laughed, taking this as an expression of Luo Nan's stubbornness. Liang Lu consoled him with good intentions. With your current level of ability, 10 seconds is already quite amazing. However, on the battlefield, a 10-second burst of power is meaningless. Unless you're a suicide squad, the commanding officers still need everyone to have a sustained and stable output. You coming here was the correct choice. Laying out the electromagnetic field was very popular in the beehive. Also, don't rely too much on external objects. It's not that I'm being sour, but it's a bit too early for you to have an internalized reactor. Looking at the state of your body, your internal cultivation is already quite solid. Even if you haven't reached the stage of laying out the technique, why haven't you done the step of forming the furnace? No matter how amazing the night-level reactor is, it's still an external device. Only with your own foundation can you have it. Forming the furnace, Luo Nan barely managed to ask what the forming the furnace laying technique was. Luckily, Liang Lu had already sorted out his logic by now. He clapped his hands and apologized over and over. I almost forgot that you're a member of the 100-year sequence. You haven't achieved racial gene pool optimization yet. It's hard to avoid wasting a period of time. Speaking of which, how long has it been since you guys entered the 100-year sequence? Luo Nan nearly stumbled with this question. Luckily, Liang Lu directly went to search for information at this time. Luo Nan didn't know where Liang Lu got this information from, but he sighed with regret, only 30 years. In other words, there's still 3 or 4 generations of time. It's not easy. The 30 years Liang Lu spoke of was obviously referring to the units here. Converted to Earth time, it was around 50 years. From the perspective of Earth, the so-called 100-year sequence was the 150-year sequence. And this 30 years already covered the entire process from the era of distortion to the present age. Oh, the 30 years given by the simulator. Was this the standard? Luo Nan didn't understand half of it. He couldn't help but ask, do we have to endure for 100 years? Liang Lu sighed, laying out the technique like a pass, piling up corpses like a mountain. These aren't just words. It's extremely difficult to break through the inherent logic of genetic evolution. It requires the correct direction of evolution, a perfect research system of genetic science, a powerful social mobilization force, and an extremely bitter sacrifice, including life and morality. No one is willing to pay such a great sacrifice. But if we want to surmount the natural danger of racial evolution, we must do so. Actually, Luo Nan didn't quite understand what Liang Lu was saying, but he could already feel the heavy weight within. There was a moment of silence. Liang Lu slapped Luo Nan's shoulder when he saw this. Don't worry too much about this. I'm talking about the public structure. Of course it's difficult. If you want to evolve yourself, opportunities are very important. Just by looking at the reaction furnace, I can tell that you have luck. Who knows, you might have some accomplishments. The battlefield is a good place to render meritorious service. If you can become a meritorious subject of the Empire in time, you might be able to influence the decisions of the upper echelons. A portion of resources will be tilted toward your race. And no matter what, you guys are the first to enter the 100-year sequence since the beginning of Sin Calamity era. The role of a benchmark. Understand. Luo Nan felt the background of reality and illusion interweave. His thoughts drifted, and he actually forgot to respond. In his daze, he heard Liang Lu say, "At this time, you need to study hard. Consider yourself lucky. You've been promoted to a master in both configuration and deployment. You've learned 60 to 70% of his abilities. Whether it's for self-evolution or for feedback to your race, you'll benefit endlessly." Luo Nan subconsciously grunted and said, "Thank you." Liang Lu laughed. "Let's talk about something else. Let's properly install the external dynamo core right now. Calm your mind first. Don't be too nervous. Do you want to listen to some music?" Without waiting for Luo Nan's response, a soothing and melodious melody rang out in the cold and hard workshop that was connected by many worker bees. With Luo Nan's barely entry-level ability to appreciate music, he could roughly discern that the opening portion of the melody was accompanied by a plucked string instrument. It was cold and clear, and the resonance was very strong. It was a bit like a guitar. It was quite suitable for Rui Wen to play. Just as this thought flashed through Luo Nan's mind, he heard a clear and somewhat inexperienced voice cut in. The voice sang within the plucking sound. There were few embellishments in the technique, but the natural resonance and the metallic ringing at the end complemented the melodious melody. The voice was clearly right in front of Luo Nan, but there was a sense of spaciousness that spread out. It was so spaciousness that it was a bit sad. Then why couldn't he understand it? Luo Nan listened to a few lines before discovering that the singer was using a language that he had never come into contact with before. This is Miss Sui's Crimson Wheel. It's a song written especially for our concealed light galaxy. Liang Lu raised his head as he spoke these words. The impassioned accompaniment of a march broke the soothing prelude at nearly the same time. It was still the same tune, but the metallic texture of the singer's voice was like a sharp blade that cleaved open the wild winds of the wilderness. It dominated the entire melody. Liang Lu clenched his fists tightly amidst the song. The Crimson Will Rift. The demon eye of deep space. We are going to break through that place and seal off the greatest spreading grounds of evil poison. We are going to break through the shackles of the godly kingdom of the heavens. We are going to reorganize our territory and restore our glory. When that time comes, Miss Sui won't need to drift about amidst the flames of war. When that time comes. Luo Nan was a bit stupefied. He admitted that this song was very ear-grabbing, but where were Liang Lu's emotions and emotions reflected? Chapter 901. Unknowingly, Luo Nan and Liang Lu's conversation had seriously deviated from the main topic. Perhaps this had achieved Liang Lu's goal of calming his mind. Luo Nan just felt that he needed to save his extremely poor common sense in this game. Is this what the lyrics say? That Miss Sui isn't a citizen of the Empire. Liang Lu's mouth was a bit loose, but he had cultivated himself well. His temper had always been good. But right now, his fair face was covered in a layer of frost. How is Miss Sui not a citizen of the Empire? Those things outside are like crumbs. Just by gathering them together and signing a piece of scrap paper, you call it the Star Alliance. Those are the starfields and territories of the Empire. Sooner or later, we will take them back. I'm sorry. I misspoke. How could Luo Nan not know? He had accidentally poked a sensitive political issue. He felt wronged, but he saw that Liang Lu was a bit angry, so he quickly apologized. But in the end, he couldn't help but say, I really didn't understand the lyrics. Liang Lu blinked and finally reacted. He couldn't be bothered to be angry right now. Instead, he drew in a cold breath. No way. You don't know Miss Sui, Wei Sui. I know you're an eccentric, but this degree of eccentricity is too much. I'm really sorry that you found out. It was very clear that Luo Nan's lack of common sense had already broken through the lower limits of Liang Lu's heart, even though this was a chaotic game setting. It was to the point that Liang Lu gasped in amazement, though you're a naturalized seed, a genius of a race, I still have to say. You've betrayed your basic rights, soldier. The 4 studies and 20 subjects of generic knowledge are treasured texts of the experiences and theories of the ancients. They are the true seeds of the destiny stairway. They are scattered in the 100-year sequence. As far as I know, none of the known civilizations are promoting the 100-year sequence as the Imperium is doing. All of them are promoting the exploitation of the people in the name of ethnic specialties, raising a bunch of bonsai and parasitic maggots. You must cherish the comparison. Also, you need to learn a bit of literary and historical knowledge. Historical identity, political acumen, humanistic view of the universe. Even if you miss out on some subjects, you can't miss out on questions of principle. Liang Lu used a lot of tone words to emphasize his emotions, making Luo Nan feel more and more embarrassed. Luo Nan could only respond repeatedly, expressing that he would make up for it properly from now on. Seeing Luo Nan's sincere attitude, Liang Lu no longer refused to let the matter go. He began to impart knowledge to Luo Nan. Speaking of which, this song is sung in the language of Rainbow Realm, where Miss Sui comes from. That is a small race that has attached itself to the Empire for a long time. Their language doesn't belong to the ceremonial ancient character system. There are very, very few people who understand the language of Rainbow Realm. Sacrificial ancient characters? Luo Nan encountered yet another term that he did not understand, but it really wasn't good to break through Liang Lu's lower limit of knowledge. He could only hide it deep within his heart and vow to flip through the virtual brain system to make up for it later. Thus, he could only converse awkwardly. Is there no translation for this language? Nope. Everyone can only rely on some translation software to decipher it. The translation is choppy, and it loses the beauty that it should have. What a pity. Translation software, the semantic problem of the lyrics was solved, but Luo Nan was truly baffled. Why did you use such an uncommon language? The lyrics are also very important. Miss Sui naturally has her own considerations. Yes, there are many. For example, she was forced by the political pressure of the Star Alliance. She was forced by those senseless civil organizations. She was forced by the Pantheon Temple. But I know that Miss Sui only did this out of artistic considerations. She considered her heart. Only in this way can there be such a natural beauty. It was very hard for Luo Nan to bicker with a brainless fan about this sort of thing. Plus, he was more interested in the fragments of information that Liang Lu spoke of about the Star Alliance and the Pantheon Temple. Even though the game's scene was bound to be limited, the scene was supported by a rich and heavy torrent of information. What Luo Nan needed to do right now was to strip clear clues from within and summarize the general outline. The song named Crimson Wool had already entered its second cycle. It returned to its earliest soothing melody that was close to a cappella. Liang Lu bent over under this melody. He subconsciously lowered his voice. Of course, there's another theory. Miss Sui specifically used such an uncommon language to write the lyrics. She actually did this to conceal the part she wrote for Her Highness. Confused face. Luo Nan probably failed in managing his expression, but Liang Lu suddenly became alert. He hurriedly straightened his waist and confessed in a loud voice. Cough. I'm just saying. Her Highness is one with the Empire. It's not a big deal to write it for her. Besides, even if that's the case, I won't give up so easily. What the heck? Luo Nan felt quite powerless. He would rather this minister Liang Lu return to the reserved attitude he had in the beginning. Liang Lu didn't know Luo Nan's thoughts. He just borrowed this momentum to set down terms for Luo Nan. You must be familiar with Miss Suyi's songs while working in the 2 Hive. I'm also extremely supportive of being promoted to a colonel. I have a debut album, a second album, and a worldwide recording version. I'm currently waiting for my third album. I can lend it to you for now, but you must take good care of it during the loan period. Luo Nan didn't understand what a worldwide recording version was, but he didn't have the strength to ask. From his perspective, it was fine to just listen to good songs. He would vomit if he listened to familiar songs. But it wouldn't be good to refuse in person. It would be fine if he rejected the other's good intentions, but if he were to be accused of looking down on his idol, only the heavens knew whether or not this brainless fan would stab him with a karate chop. It must be known that Luo Nan was still lying on the operating seat with the back of his head exposed. Luckily, Liang Lu possessed the basic qualities of a soldier, even though he was a chatterbox and liked to add drama to himself. He received a boost of motivation from Miss Su Yi's singing, so he didn't delay his business. Then, he quickly and efficiently equipped Luo Nan with a more suitable external dynamo core. It was called the vertical collar. This external dynamo core had a shape similar to the collar of a combat suit. In fact, it was bound together with the combat suit. It was quite large in size, and its integration was a bit lacking. However, there were many convenient external tools that connected it to the host's nervous system through simulated neurons attached to the back of the brain. It could realize many functions, and it was very suitable for a rookie maintenance soldier like Luo Nan. It was called an external device, but in reality, it had undergone a small neurosurgery to realize the connection of nerve signals. According to Liang Lu's words, it was on the hair transplant level. Luo Nan was considering whether or not he could use the external neuron to replace it. Thinking about this was a bit far off. Luo Nan began to slowly familiarize himself with the practical operation of the vertical collar under Liang Lu's introduction and guidance. Liang Lu really did have the qualifications to be reserved in the professional field. He explained in detail, and his points were clear. He also had a considerable amount of practical experience. When he first entered the army, his first external dynamo core was also the vertical collar. God! It was only after 20 weeks of abyss time that he made a replacement upgrade under the suggestion of Colonel Xingzhan. He spoke to Luo Nan like this level of control of the dynamo core is idiot-like. You don't need to put any effort into it. Your thoughts need to transcend the specific equipment and facilities and rise to the level of configuration. This is why the logistics department and the maintenance department are fighting over people who specialize in configuration. Come. Let's go through the basics once. The practical task that Liang Lu arranged for Luo Nan was very simple. He just had Luo Nan read the instruction manual once. Then he would control the operating position and complete the final debugging. Liang Lu's reasoning for this was, don't look at how peaceful the hive is right now. A week ago when the barrier went out of control, the servant army broke through twice in a row. The hive was nearly wiped out. I'm absolutely not praising that self-righteous fellow. We need to be prepared for danger in times of peace, right? That fellow is so unreliable. God knows how long his repaired barrier can last. The self-righteous fellow in Liang Lu's words could only lie on the operating position. He shut his mouth tightly and obediently executed the prescribed movements. It was indeed as Liang Lu said. The basics were very simple. Luo Nan quickly grasped the hair transplant. No, the installation and debugging method of the vertical collar dynamo core. Next time, even if he came alone, he would be able to smoothly complete the relevant work. The fixed ring on the operating position opened and Luo Nan let out a breath. Right when he was about to get rid of this slightly awkward position, he suddenly heard Liang Lu shout, "Hold on." Liang Lu placed his hand on Luo Nan's shoulder as he spoke. He then spoke with an extremely serious tone. His target was not Luo Nan, but Colonel Xing, who was still in the command room. "Yes, Colonel." "Understood. All implants, the installation of peripherals, temporarily. Liang Lu had already lost his composure a bit. Luckily, he was able to adjust himself in the next moment. He looked at the time display and spoke with an even graver tone, reporting to the officer. 2 minutes ago, I already performed the surgery to install the peripheral dynamo core for Private Luo Nan. He then reported an even more accurate time, as well as the worker bee grid and the machine's code. There was no immediate response from the other side. Instead, a clear projection appeared before Luo Nan's eyes a few seconds later. The gray-skinned giant, Colonel Xing, sat behind a flickering workbench of all colors. His bloodshot pupils shifted over. Luo Nan could obviously guess that there was a huge problem with the installation equipment, the system, or the usage of the dynamo core. If this was the real world, he would probably be nervous. Right now, he really was a bit nervous. His game character subconsciously struggled free from Liang Lu's pressing palm. He stood up from the operating position and stood straight. Colonel. There's no need to be nervous. Colonel Xingzhan's tone was a bit gentler than before, but it was still cold and detached. He didn't explain the problem to Luo Nan. He just said, there will always be accidents on the battlefield. Old soldiers endure accidents and still have to do things. Recruit. Learn how to do things if you're faking it. Luo Nan's game character was quite straightforward. He responded in a loud voice, yes, Colonel. Colonel Xingzhan's gaze turned to Liang Lu. You're the one who brought him. You'll be responsible to the end. He'll follow you wherever you go. If there's a problem, deal with it at the first instant. At the same time, report it to me. Liang Lu's fair face was a bit flushed, but he responded with an even louder voice without the slightest hesitation, yes, Colonel. Chapter 902. Luo Nan began his career as a maintenance soldier in Beehive Relay Station 2 the moment the order to be promoted to colonel was issued. Officer Liang Lu became his direct superior. He taught Luo Nan how to maintain and repair all the equipment, instruments, pipelines, and even building structures in Beehive 2. They were currently in the middle of a war, and he was affected by the negative buff of a certain opinionated fellow. The related work intensity was extremely high. Even a pure rookie recruit like Luo Nan had a large amount of piecemeal work to do. Compared to the chatting stage before the dynamo core was implanted, the current Luo Nan was like a spinning top being whipped. He couldn't rest for even a moment. If he were to use game standards to measure this, then this would probably be the type of masochistic work of a small pantheon god with an extremely strong sense of immersion but extremely bad gaming pleasure. Luo Nan continued his gaming career. But during this process, he discovered that he had to face two problems that had nothing to do with the main storyline of the game or his job. The first problem didn't even belong to the game scene itself, but it was closely related to it. Luo Nan discovered that the amount of time he spent in the game scene was a bit excessive. An excessive deviation. A person's subjective perception of time was quite vague. Sleep, relaxation, concentration, high-pressure work, boring repetitions, and various other scenes were all different. Some seconds felt like years, while others passed in the blink of an eye. But in any case, people were able to quickly adjust to a publicly accepted standard by relying on timekeeping tools. But Luo Nan was facing a problem right now. He felt that a long time had passed in the game scene. The base's public timer, personal auxiliary AI, and even Liang Lu and Colonel Xingzhan's manual verification all indicated that he had already spent 3 days in Beehive Relay Station 2. Of course, Heaven Abyss time, which adhered to the decimal system, was a bit weaker in terms of units of days. When converted to Earth time, it was around 40 hours. Even if Luo Nan calculated 40 hours, it was enough for him to fly back and forth between T-City and Ban City. The situation in the real world clearly wasn't like this. Luo Nan's mind was immersed in the game scene. He still had some basic perception of the real world. He would also react to external stimuli. At the very least, the auction was about to start. If he really pushed it to that step, whether it was Zhang Yingying on the airship or Yin Lo in Bin City, someone would definitely wake him up. Luo Nan slept very peacefully during this 40-hour interval. It was just like an ordinary nap. He closed his eyes. He did not open his eyes yet. Only his consciousness flipped in the primal chaos, shuttling back and forth in time. Now, it could basically be confirmed that there was a clear mismatch between the time in and out of the game. Luo Nan's intuition told him that his main body was like sitting on a spaceship that approached the speed of light. Time seemed to freeze at the instant of acceleration. His consciousness, which was immersed in the game, moved forward step by step according to the normal and understandable logic of time. He spent a busy, exhausting, and fulfilling 40 hours. But the truth could be reversed. Everything was normal with Luo Nan's main body, but his consciousness was immersed in the game. It was operating at an extreme speed. The simulated scene was built upon the foundation of a massive amount of information. It was sliced and rendered in hair-raising detail. It wasn't that time passed too slowly, but that his consciousness spun too quickly. The inner universe simulator within the virtual brain system followed. Perhaps it could be said that it was guiding Luo Nan's consciousness to enter this dimension together. This was the most reasonable explanation for Luo Nan's current situation. If this really was the case, then he didn't dare to easily interrupt or quit. After all, from the current situation, this phenomenon was beneficial to him. Time was extremely precious to everyone, even the operation of pure consciousness. Luo Nan didn't think about going out and flipping through the information. He didn't know whether or not exchanging information with the outside world of the simulator would affect the relevant operations. If by some chance he missed this opportunity due to some accident, then it would be useless to regret it. It's like this. I'll let my vapor clone fly with Her Majesty Empress Wu all the way to D City. It doesn't matter if I wake up later. Luo Nan was soon freed from the problem of the mismatch in the flow of time. He seized every minute, no longer thinking about superfluous matters. However, another problem came at him in a very absurd way, and it came from his Shangwanliang hut. For the past 3 days, this young and relatively simple recruit had been brooding over the fact that he had implanted the vertical collar dynamo core into Luo Nan during the moment of crisis. But his work was related to the war situation, so he couldn't give Luo Nan much consideration. He could only think of ways to compensate Luo Nan in other ways. His method of compensation made Luo Nan feel rather uncomfortable. On Luo Nan's 3rd day on duty as a recruit, he was officially assigned to the maintenance post of the central pipeline and safety partition area of the 2 hive, thanks to Liang Lu's proposal and his relatively outstanding foundation in theory. Luo Nan was promoted and approved by the officer. He was officially assigned to the maintenance post of the central pipeline and safety partition area of the 2 hive. It was a vital location and a key department, but it was relatively safe. Aside from facing densely packed mechanical creations every day, memorizing large amounts of maintenance machinery, equipment, and infrastructure design blueprints and applying them flexibly, often following the main officer to deal with abnormal problems, and being on standby 24/7 when he had nothing to do, there were practically no other flaws. It was an extremely good post to learn and gain experience. The recruits and veterans of the logistics department, and even some sergeants and officers, might not be able to transfer here even after a few years. But it would be far too naive to think of this as Liang Lu's compensation. Liang Lu, who had not been in the military for long, was a hot-blooded youth with strong principles when it came to official matters. He recommended Luo Nan to take up the post because of Luo Nan's solid attainments in configuration, his obsession with research, and his obsessive-compulsive and strict attitude. He was the most suitable for this post. His compensation would only come from a personal level. The battle outside the relay station entered a deadlock once more, and the operational pressure of the 2 hive entered a period of relative stability. The two finally had the chance to chat a bit more, but they were not sitting idly with tea. They were on the way back from the end of the pipeline repair mission. This time, Liang Lu came prepared as well. The first single, the second single, and the special edition of the Champion single. These are the only ones that have been officially sold. They are all global recordings. Most of Miss Sui's works were composed by herself, and she was an independent musician after terminating her contract with her management company. She could compose as she pleased. She really couldn't be considered a high yield. There's also this. This is a passerby's camera before she officially debuted. It's really natural, without any embellishments. Unfortunately, it's just a copy. Some of the details aren't clear enough. These are all. I'll lend them to you for now. Liang Lu's resolute momentum dropped quite miserably when he said the words "lend them to you for now." Luo Nan was still able to feel the bitter emotions of having his flesh cut. From Liang Lu's perspective, this was indeed a very sincere compensation. After all, these were the flesh of his heart. Cutting them all off would cost him his life. Luo Nan simply didn't have the chance to refuse. This was because the two were currently riding in a specialized maintenance vehicle. They were traveling within an enormous pipeline tunnel, and Liang Lu had already placed the 2 albums and 1 singles echo box in Luo Nan's dorm room. He also gave Liang Lu a personal safe. In any case, under Liang Lu's influence, the current Luo Nan finally understood what was called a global recording edition. It was different from the lossless format that he previously understood. When Luo Nan put on a special sensor and used the vertical collar dynamo core to drive the special echo box, he listened to the passerby's sound source of Miss Plain Clothed, the only person Liang Lu brought with him. Luo Nan was actually able to feel the unique pulse within his sea of consciousness. Yes, the so-called global recording edition was actually able to record the fluctuations on the mental plane. It was stored on a special medium and played repeatedly. It was an extremely novel feeling. It should have belonged to the instantaneous state of the sea of consciousness. Through a special medium, it traversed space and time to interact with the current mental plane. Luo Nan had never thought of such a form before. And as he listened attentively, he was able to experience a unique beauty of order from within. Music was originally in order, but normal feelings were emotional. Luo Nan wasn't a particularly emotional person. To be precise, he strove to follow reason and not be that emotional. This Miss Plain Clothed song was in the global recording edition mode. It just so happened to satisfy his bidirectional mental state. He saw the structure from his sensibility, and he touched upon his emotions from the structure. It was quite appropriate. This Miss Plain Clothed clearly had some accomplishments on the mental side. It was said that this was just a replica version from the fan production line. It couldn't be considered a true global recording. Luo Nan didn't listen for too long during working hours, even though he had a mission gap. He soon cut off his control over the dynamo core. Liang Lu's low sensitivity, bad sound source, lack of auxiliary equipment modules, and other similar explanations and complaints rang out in his ears. After hearing so much, Luo Nan even began to agree with Liang Lu's daily nagging of going to listen to the song live no matter what. Maybe it would be more interesting if we listened to the song live. Yeah. It was rare to see Luo Nan express the same sentiments at the same time. Liang Lu slapped his thigh. It's a pity that Miss Plain Clothed's 3rd degree is still far from completion. Who knows how long it will take to gather enough songs for the concert. Actually, the most lively thing right now is the passerby audio source in our hands, and it just so happens that it's a copy. However, in the repeater station, there really are people who have collected the original, global recording version. Sai, since you're a new fan, why don't we pay a visit? It's perfect for both work and personal matters. Ha! Without waiting for Luo Nan to sort out the logic, Liang Lu had already turned on the communicator. Officer Xiao, Officer Liang Lu reporting. Right now, Private Luo Nan and I are located in the central pipeline tunnel. We are 2 minutes away from Observation Station 7 by car. Officer, in view of the fact that you have yet to fully recover from the evil poison, we will follow the random inspection process to conduct a random inspection of your position. Please give your instructions. Liang Lu gave the stupefied Luo Nan a hand gesture in the next second, indicating that everything was settled. Chapter 903. Liang Lu's words of a 2-minute car ride were true. The auxiliary AI had evaluated the speed of the special maintenance vehicle through the pipeline tunnel. Converted to Earth time, it was around 100 seconds. This was the time it took to say a few words. During this time, Luo Nan was amazed by Liang Lu's logic. He also felt that the name Officer Xiao was familiar. He couldn't help but ask, Officer Xiao. Is he the officer who suffered the backlash from the structure of the space-time fortress? Luo Nan really didn't have the face to say the words opinionated fellow. He could only use this overly formal description to replace it. Speaking of which, this was the first time he heard of this name. Liang Lu had told him about it. Apparently, this was the first mid-level officer to suffer from this in the Two Hive district. Yes, that's him. We're just going to do a random inspection. There were indeed similar jobs in the maintenance drill manual, but for basic soldiers like them, even the technical soldiers who were directly promoted to officer, they wouldn't do it carelessly. Instead, they would specially assign people to do this sort of thing. Liang Lu winked at Luo Nan, relax. He understands what's going on. Actually, we're just looking for an excuse to visit a friend. Luo Nan winked back. Don't look at how his military rank is higher than mine by 4 ranks. That's because his surname is Sean. He's older, and he has the advantage of going to military school. I've never been afraid of him in the 5 direct lessons of the general knowledge stage. I've only admired him for one thing in the past 20 years, and that is the worldwide recording of Miss Sui from before her debut. It's out of print. I've always suspected that a great lord of the empire passed by and was triggered to record it. If I were to calculate the date. So it was an old friend. Luo Nan automatically blocked Liang Lu's conclusions from his idle research. He had a general understanding of Liang Lu and Xiao. He soon realized something. Sean. Isn't his surname Xiao? The speed of the special maintenance vehicle suddenly dropped. Luo Nan thought that something had happened. He turned his head and saw Liang Lu's complicated and heavy expression. Oh Luo Nan. Why don't we first learn some common sense? Officer Xiao's full name was Zhan Xiao. The name structure of the Heavenly Yuan Empire was similar to that of Earth's East Asia region. Basically, there were surnames and given names, with the surname first and the given name second, showing some kind of family and bloodline inheritance. However, Zhan Zhao's situation was a little special. His military rank was colonel, but in the relay station, basically no one called him Colonel Zhan. Instead, they called him Colonel Xiao. It was the complete opposite of how they addressed Xing Zhan as Colonel Xing. This was because, in the Heavenly Yuan Empire, Zhan was a national surname. To be more precise, it was the surname of the imperial family. In order to show respect to the imperial family, it was an unwritten rule to call them by their given name and not their surname. It wasn't against the law to address him incorrectly, but it was still impolite. Just as Liang Lu had said, living in the light concealment galaxy was basic social knowledge. Luo Nan's clumsy performance was tantamount to giving a vivid footnote to the negative description of a person who betrays basic rights. I'm sorry, forget it. You're so young, and your perception and design skills are so strong. Of course you have to give up something to be fair. Now it looks like you've even given up on common sense, aside from your fleshly body talent. It was unknown whether Liang Lu was consoling Luo Nan or himself. Half a second later, Liang Lu couldn't help but advise Luo Nan. When you see Zhan Xiao in a bit, try to talk as little as possible. Talk about things on a technical level. He's fine in everything else. He's loyal and devoted to Her Highness, and he's sincere to Miss Sui. However, his thoughts are still from before calamity. He's very sensitive to some things. Ha! It must be said that Liang Lu's considerations were extremely thorough, but there were always unexpected things in this world. This was true even in a game setting. Luo Nan had traveled more than half the distance. The tunnel leading to the observation station was already in sight when the patrol detection system sounded an alarm. It interrupted Liang Lu's painstaking and well-intentioned arrangements. The red light flickered, disturbing the monotonous and stable lighting environment of the pipeline tunnel. Luo Nan and Liang Lu glanced at each other. They didn't say anything. The back of the dedicated maintenance vehicle had already opened. Luo Nan's vertical collar dynamo core controlled 4 probing balls in a row. They floated soundlessly in the air, and the probing rays, sound waves, and electromagnetic waves were released in a crisscrossed manner. They advanced toward the suspected area indicated by the system. The 4 probing spheres formed a special detection array between each other. It was beneficial to Luo Nan's soul strength, and it provided protection in the opposite direction. It was like a powerful flashlight, gathering highly concentrated and extremely sensitive probing psychic waves toward the suspected area of darkness. That's right. It was a flashlight. Ever since Luo Nan realized the external release of his mental senses, he had always been the all-encompassing and omniscient representative on Earth. He had a 360-degree observation angle with no blind spots. He had few misgivings, and he could rampage as he pleased. At his peak, it could be said that the radiance of the stars, the light of the moon, and the light of the sun were like a soul cloak that covered an area of 500 million square kilometers across the globe. It even penetrated the barrier of space and time, pointing straight to the more complex and inconceivable dimensions. When had he ever assumed the stance of a flashlight? But in the relay station, in this game scene, the way he used it in the past had a rather lengthy and exclusive term. When translated into Earth's language, it was roughly called drifting fish eggs released by the jade crystal array. It specifically referred to those rookies who lived in the most ideal environment of the mental sea. They were completely unaware of the cruelty of the real world. In the military, recklessly using soul strength would result in a spanking on the buttocks and confinement. The reason for all of this was the extreme environment wreaking havoc in the light concealment galaxy's evil poison. It was also the structure of the mental plane that was still intertwined with each other under the protection of the jade crystal array. As for what nefarious poison was, and how the extremely dangerous environment was formed, those were professional questions that even large books would find difficult to explain. Luo Nan wasn't the sort of rebellious child that strived to stand out from the masses. He abided by the rules, especially during the research phase when he wasn't bursting with inspiration. In addition, the current time deviation was highly advantageous to him. Even though he held a certain amount of doubt towards the setting of the game scene, he still slowly made contact with it from the perspective and progress of a recruit. He attempted to peel off the outer layer of confusion layer by layer and explore the mysteries within. Right now, Luo Nan was strictly following the drill manual for the maintenance patrol. He used the scanning equipment as the guide and relied on the limited mental detection of the probing equipment as the central axis. He carried out an inspection bit by bit. His soul strength was restrained so that it didn't leak out in the slightest. It only went through the simulation of neurons to form an interference effect with the peripheral, vertical collar, dynamo core. Then it was mixed with electromagnetic signals to form a relatively safe psychic wave structure. This was the true external release. The strong light flashlight was formed from the integration of this strict and dense psychic wave structure. It formed a probing light beam that was hard to see with the naked eye. It pierced into the originally unreachable dark land. Bring. Luo Nan waved the flashlight a bit stiffly. This wasn't the first time he used this method, but he still wasn't used to it. He always felt that he had become a primary school student practicing calligraphy in class. He gripped the shaft of his pen, solemnly and clumsily drawing mosquito-repellent incense. Compared to Luo Nan's usual methods of pure sensing, soul cloak, and so on, the strong light flashlight really didn't have much prestige. But as a drill technique that the Empire's military persisted with for many years, its design and operation were exquisite and practical. At least it was enough for this moment. Primary inspection shows no defects. Entering the secondary passageway. Number 1B542. Confirmed to be a permanent worker bee construction. Blueprint number refining 2811. Alignment complete. No defects on the surface. Do you want to do an in-depth dialysis? Luo Nan made the relevant records at the same time as he did the inspection. He reported it to his superior, Liang Lu. There was a bit of eagerness in his words. Wait a moment. Liang Lu was in contact with his superiors right now. He wanted to see whether or not the advanced sensors of the second hive and the relay station had recorded the alarm here. His superior's answer to this was, no. Liang Lu had ample experience in inspection. He immediately inquired about whether or not there were any battles or shockwaves caused by battles in the nearby area from the time the two of them passed by. Luo Nan and Liang Lu were performing a round-trip inspection this time. They had come to this area at most an hour ago, Heaven Abyss time. They had done a serious inspection according to the inspection requirements. They hadn't discovered any problems at the time. This time, the command console gave an affirmative answer. Liang Lu frowned, then he turned his head to face Luo Nan. There's trouble. It's very likely to be an extremely low-intensity leakage. And it might be a living body. Ha! Even though Luo Nan had been cramming for basic knowledge, he still needed to do a thorough search to find the corresponding item when encountering this sort of situation. Luckily, Liang Lu was a qualified superior. He quickly gave further guidance. It's a low-level parasitic phantom. Of course, it might also be a living body of sin poison. No matter which one it is, it certainly possesses basic intellect or instincts. It's extremely likely that it has already found a parasitic region, or even a host. The corner of Luo Nan's eyes twitched a few times. He struggled to keep up with Liang Lu's train of thought. Phantoms and sin poison were different concepts, but they were related to each other. The parasitic region and the host had different levels of danger, but it wasn't a simple ascending relationship. Luo Nan had to say that the novice guide scene of the Innerverse simulator was not up to par. This sort of complex background setting and corresponding missions were far too unfriendly to a game player who popped in from thin air. While Luo Nan was hard at work searching for knowledge, Liang Lu fulfilled his duty of leading troops. He asked Luo Nan a technical question. Looking at the current situation, do you think it's a phantom or sin poison? How are you going to deal with it? Strangely enough, Luo Nan was able to keep up with Liang Lu's pace when the question really came to his head. His bitter training in the drill manual and his memorization of the rules and regulations were effective. He muttered to himself for a bit before replying calmly, no matter what it is, it needs to be dealt with in a way that deals with sin poison. If it were up to me, I would choose to divide the suspected parasitic region. This is because this is the only processing skill I possess. Then, I would entrench myself in place and wait for backup. Chapter 904. Luo Nan's answer strictly adhered to the military drill and maintenance regulations. He didn't cower, he didn't advance rashly. Anyone would like this kind of recruit subordinate. If he could successfully practice it, then it would be even more perfect. Liang Lu nodded his head in satisfaction. But in the next instant, his neck suddenly stiffened. Split. You're using a split. Isn't it lighthouse? Luo Nan looked at him strangely. Lighthouse is a defensive skill. It won't solve the problem here. Of course I know, but I only taught you lighthouse. Who did you learn to split from? The professional skills involved in the 120 rules of base maintenance are all taught through simulation. Among them, the vertical collar dynamo core only supports lighthouse and split. You taught me lighthouse yesterday, so I'm going to continue learning it today. Liang Lu's neck leaned back. He subconsciously wanted to change his angle to observe the recruit he had personally taught. His expression was rather subtle. But Luo Nan, lighthouse, is a cohesive type. Split is a fabric type. The tricks to the two are completely different. Don't you think that when you learn it, Liang Lu's words were a bit difficult to continue. He just extended his hand and made a kneading and releasing motion. In reality, even he himself didn't know what he was gesturing with. Luo Nan thought for a bit and answered seriously, my foundation in quiet cultivation isn't quite enough. Lighthouse is easy to learn but hard to master. Looking at the current overall effects, split is a bit better. Liang Lu opened his mouth, but he was actually unable to refute. He took a deep breath in the next second and forcefully pulled his thoughts back from the minutiae. He continued to carry out his responsibilities as a superior officer. Your processing methods are extremely accurate. Split is the only and most efficient processing technique at this stage. But you're a recruit after all. You lack actual combat experience. For the sake of safety, you still need to use lighthouse to protect yourself. You can also use this to guide reinforcements. Luo Nan listened very seriously and nodded his head. But Liang Lu was still worried that he would misunderstand. He immediately said, I'm not saying that you're wrong. But let's think of a more difficult situation. If you're performing patrol work alone and you're faced with this situation, and no one is cooperating with you, you'll have to perform dual operations if you forcefully split. I've checked your medical report. It seems that the original brain structure does not support multitasking, so it's more difficult for you. You can ask Colonel Xing about this shortcoming later. He is from the School of Creation. He can teach you a few things about the skill of precise planning. Although I am also from the School of Creation, I am far from being able to teach in accordance with your aptitude. Speaking of which, if you're talented in segmentation, you should be able to learn this quite quickly. The School of Creation. Luo Nan muttered to himself. His train of thought was a bit erratic, and he subconsciously thought of Dean Wan. Then, he remembered that he had already learned the so-called precise coordination from Dean Wan. However, there was no way he could explain this to Liang Lu. It could be said that Liang Lu gave his all in teaching actual combat without holding anything back. He had already assessed the danger level of this matter. It belonged to the troublesome but relatively low level of danger, which was suitable for a rookie to handle. But then again, was segmentation considered elementary? Liang Lu shook his head, shaking off these meaningless distracting thoughts. He gave Luo Nan a task. Since you said segmentation, then segmentation will be fine. I'll be the support. I'll use lighthouse for defense. You'll handle the matter of segmentation. You have confidence, right? I do. Luo Nan puffed out his chest as he answered. Then he gave a portion of the control authority over the levitating probe ball, which was already 30 meters away, to Liang Lu. But before this, the 4 probe balls all opened up with miniature cracks, causing the several hundred segmentation instruments hidden inside to pour down like seeds. They fell to the ground in a pitter-patter. Wasn't it too much? Liang Lu was a professional maintenance soldier proficient in the skill of segmentation. He frowned when he saw this. But he didn't say anything. After taking over the authority of the probe ball, he controlled it to withdraw from the secondary tunnel and turn it back to the dedicated maintenance vehicle. At the same time, He gathered his highly concentrated spirit waves and formed an energy-gathering halo that interfered and supported the mental plane. This highly concentrated halo looked like a lighthouse piercing through the darkness from afar if one were to use soul strength to clairvoyance. It enveloped the two people in the specialized maintenance vehicle within the radiance, forming a sealed safe zone. At the same time, it gave the relay station's backup power a more precise direction, ready to receive the support of the jade crystal array at any time. This was Lighthouse. It was a derivative skill of the strong light flashlight. Its function wasn't too obvious within the base, but in the field combat area, this was a godly skill for a single soldier to call for backup. It was unknown how many people had relied on this to survive. Similarly, there were quite a few idiots who exposed their positions during unessential times. They became living targets for the enemy, dying without an intact corpse. In any case, from Liang Lu's point of view, this skill was most suitable for a recruit like Luo Nan. Perhaps one day he would rely on this skill to survive. He originally wanted to use this skill to test Luo Nan step by step. He wanted to mention a few things to take note of to prevent this young fellow, who lacked common sense, from losing his life in a muddle-headedness due to this matter. He never expected that not only would he fail to test Luo Nan with just a few words, he would also become Liang Lu's job. And from then on, Liang Lu was reduced to an auxiliary soldier. He gave the most technical content to Luo Nan, who had just officially taken up his post not too long ago. It looked like Luo Nan was quite confident, but Liang Lu was still a bit worried. He used the standard array to give a partial support to Luo Nan for the sake of safety. When the two were carrying out their official mission, they would follow the requirements of the drill manual. The frame of their body and soul and the corresponding energy flow would be linked through the dynamo cores. They would form the classic standard combat array of the military, which was referred to as the standard array. This was to realize the effect of 1 + 1 greater than 2. Luo Nan felt it as well. He nodded towards Liang Lu. Liang Lu indicated to the young fellow to concentrate. Luo Nan expressed that he understood, but a portion of his mind was still drifting. There was nothing he could do. Every time this happened, he couldn't help but think that the so-called standard array was simply a replica of the formatting domain. However, the formatting domain was more unbridled in its application on the mental plane. The standard array, on the other hand, required more flexibility in terms of personnel requirements. It had a variety of split and merge structures, and its core was more rigorous and thorough. It was the result of repeated tempering. After exiting the game, he should be able to refer to the standard array and properly study Captain Jimmy's state. Part of Luo Nan's mind was diverted, but it was more than enough to deal with the several hundred centimeters scattered on the ground. The so-called segmentator was actually a kind of mechanical crawler the size of a grain of rice. Following Luo Nan's control of psychic waves, its built-in microchip was activated. Amidst the rustling sounds, the egg-like chrysalis that were on standby transformed into something similar to the working form of ants. Luo Nan's thoughts changed again, and over 500 mechanical ants fought to be the first to pounce at the suspected leaking area. At first, it felt like a chaotic charge, but in the space of a breath, they formed a standard crescent-shaped formation. They were like pincers that unfolded in both directions. The encirclement range grew larger and larger, but the basic formation wasn't the slightest bit chaotic. Beautiful. Liang Lu muttered. Before Luo Nan's voice could fall, a portion of the mechanical ants buzzed and flew up. They completely broke away from the restrictions of the terrain, pulling open an even more unrestrained array structure in the three-dimensional space. Liang Lu subconsciously sucked in a breath. The advance and changes of the mechanical ants exceeded the range of his vision from the very beginning. He relied on the feedback of the equipment and the mental plane to sense them. The more he did this, the more he was able to feel the configuration logic hidden within the rapid split and merge of several hundred mechanical ants. So reckless. Luo Nan had already entered a relatively focused state with the help of the front-end operations. He turned a deaf ear to Liang Lu's praise and astonishment. 3 days in heaven abyss time. 40 hours in earth time. Luo Nan learned quite a bit in the relay station. This included maintenance and repair of spare parts, assembly and manufacturing of machinery and equipment, patrol and maintenance of the relay station's infrastructure, pipelines. He even did a drill of emergency repairs to key areas during wartime. These were all extremely important things to learn. He was very interested in all of them. But there was still one content that made him unconsciously invest even more energy into it. Sinful poison. This was a phenomenon that could only possibly exist in the light concealment system. Too much prior knowledge was needed to describe its cause, origin, and development process. This included, but was not limited to, ancient gods and new gods, the creation, development, and inheritance of the Heaven Abyss Spirit Network, research on the relationship between hereditary species and ancient gods, the production and differentiation of fantasy species, the 2 wars of gods, the founding history of the Heavenly Yuan Empire, research on Lord Zhanhe, special research on Sin Calamity. There were many complex courses that Luo Nan would not be able to complete in half his life. Many of these were not within the scope of general education. Even the professionals of the Heavenly Yuan Empire might not be able to explain them clearly. They even argued with each other because of different directions or standpoints. They even attacked each other endlessly. At present, Luo Nan could only clearly understand one basic concept: the so-called sinful poison was some inconceivably powerful existences fighting over or defending the Heaven Abyss Spirit Network, the greatest invention since the birth of the universe. The sinful poison warped part of the framework of the Heaven Abyss Spirit Network and the surrounding spacetime structure of the light concealment system. In the end, the sinful poison formed a terrifying negative effect within a certain range of spacetime. Some of the information directly regarded the sinful poison as a kind of corpse poison. The so-called corpse referred to the indescribable and unimaginable remains of powerful existences that perished in the bitter struggle for ultimate authority over the Heaven Abyss Spirit Network. Of course, this also included the twisted wills of the remnant souls, the laws of destruction, the collapsed spacetime, and the gods and believers that attached themselves to them. In the end, the innumerable wreckage of corpses and dead souls became the breeding ground for the sinful poison. In the end, this terrifying poison was pushed to the regions where all life and consciousness existed. It endlessly mutated and multiplied, forming a completely new ecology under the distorted framework of the Heaven Abyss Spirit Network. Doesn't this look a bit familiar? Chapter 905. There was no doubt that the first thing Luo Nan thought of when he understood the basic concept of sin poison was the mutant infection. It was the mutant era that started on Earth 50 years ago. There were certain similarities between the external appearances of the two. Luo Nan even had the basis and space to go a step further in his association. But if you were to strictly compare the two, there were still many differences besides the similarities. Luo Nan didn't have enough knowledge to make an accurate analysis. He could only take an even more serious attitude to understand the relevant information, to study and verify it. He believed that the knowledge he learned in the game's scene would be very, very useful. The Hongguang system was once the holy land of the founding ruler of the Heavenly Yuan Empire. It was the greatest and longest-lasting victim of the terrifying negative effects of sin poison. It was to the point that the era after the birth of sin poison was called the Calamity Era in history textbooks. Since the beginning of the Calamity Era, the remnant citizens of the Heavenly Yuan Empire and the Hongguang system struggled to survive for several thousand years. But they were powerless to break through the curse of sin poison. Because of the existence of sin poison, many advanced civilizations in the universe took strict precautions and hid them while they were down. They were trapped in a limited star domain, watching helplessly as the enormous empire that spanned 10 billion light-years and endless spacetime crumbled. Although the Hongguang system still maintained a complete military and political system of the Heavenly Yuan Empire, its strength was no longer the same as it was during the Empire's heyday. The people of the Hongguang system were tormented to the point they wished they were dead. But on the other hand, they were able to persevere for such a long time and still maintain a considerable amount of strength. The Imperial Army of the Hongguang system was certainly the group of people in the universe most adept at dealing with sin poison. In fact, the military's tactical and technical manuals that Luo Nan had seen had detailed and targeted arrangements made in regards to the various common forms of the existence of sin poison. Through war after war, these techniques, experiences, and the crystallization of blood were instilled into the brains of every combat personnel of the Empire. As for how effective the usage was, it depended on the individual. But no matter what, any soldier of the Empire that had been in the army for more than half a year had a yardstick in their hearts. Their accuracy would vary based on the amount of experience they had. Right now, Liang Lu, Luo Nan's superior officer, was a bit uncertain. Although he believed in Luo Nan's ability to carry out the technical manuals, he still had some reservations in his heart as to how far Luo Nan could carry it out in actual combat. After all, there were more than 500 syncopators. Even for him, who came from the school of creation, controlling them wasn't as easy as flipping his hand. Especially when Luo Nan was so reckless. Liang Lu was able to feel that Luo Nan was quite open in his control of the syncopator. Luo Nan was able to detect and adjust the information back and forth. Luo Nan suppressed the upper limit set by the drill manual for the micro-control of his soul strength. He sought perfection. But this was often the time when a recruit was in trouble. Steady, steady. Liang Lu couldn't stop mumbling. At the same time, he used his authority as a superior to activate the automatic switching function. Luo Nan's operating privileges would automatically transfer to Liang Lu if Luo Nan made multiple consecutive mistakes or if he made a single major mistake under this setup. Frankly speaking, if Liang Lu were to operate the syncopator according to his plan, he wouldn't be so serious. But this was Liang Lu's first time leading an army. The default setting for consecutive errors was 5 times. Liang Lu hesitated for a moment and changed it to 3 times. However, before he could confirm it, he changed it back again. If he approved of the soldiers under him normally, there was no reason for him not to approve on the battlefield. Even if he might lose a life, it was more likely that he would gain a life. This was the instruction of Colonel Xingzhan. Of course he had to follow it. Besides, this wasn't a time of life and death yet. Liang Lu let out a long breath. He no longer cared about the switching of privileges. He gritted his teeth to maintain the stability of his words and thoughts. He followed the duties of a superior officer and pointed out some important matters. Pay attention. Don't pay attention to living evil poisons. Luo Nan didn't respond. He just nodded silently. Most of the time, especially in verbal communication, people often described evil poisons as a type of toxin, a type of germ. This was easier to understand. But in formal discussions, there was absolutely no way to view it as a toxin or germ. It was only viewed as a special environment and law. The most basic logic was this: the powerful existences that nurtured evil poisons were the rulers of space, time, and the laws. The negative effects they gave rise to were the same. Faced with the vast and boundless environment of space and time, as well as the infiltration of the fundamental law system, it was impossible to completely eliminate the contamination. The only way was to use the environment against the environment, to use law against law. In order to restore the positive effects of the Heaven Abyss Spirit Network to the greatest extent possible, the Jade Crystal Array was created to cover the main inhabited areas. It was capable of long-distance connections across star domains. It became the Jade Crystal Array that the Hongguang star system relied on to support the vile environment wreaking havoc within the evil poisons. But in the front lines, the crisscrossing law environment caused the protective strength of the Jade Crystal Array to drop by a large margin. As a result, all sorts of negative effects were born. The living evil poisons were one of these negative effects. Once again, it was emphasized that evil poisons were not toxins. They were not living beings either. However, evil poisons could breed many forms of living beings. This included flesh and blood creations on the material plane. There were also living beings that were pure thoughts on the mental plane. Especially things like mutants, darksider species. Luo Nan once again thought of mutants. But in the theoretical system of the Heaven Abyss Empire, there was no need to talk about those distorted flesh and blood creations. Sentient beings had a special name. Fantasy species. According to the general knowledge teaching materials of the Heaven Abyss Empire, after the appearance of the Heaven Abyss Spirit Network, the minds of the universe's living beings became more effective in interfering with the material plane. This magnified the power of the mental plane. The desires and knowledge of trillions of living beings, as well as the pointless power of faith that was cast towards the ancient gods but was destined to receive no response, all warped and mapped together, creating a marvelous existence within the sea of the mind. They were the creations of consciousness, desire, and information. They naturally did not have a material foundation, but they borrowed the power of the Heaven Abyss Spirit Network to rapidly grow. In the end, for some reason, they gave birth to the terrifying evil god represented by the sin of the six heavens. They ignited the first all-domain war of God since the creation of the world. They were the main culprits behind the arrival of the evil calamity world. Truth be told, from the perspective of an earthling, this didn't seem like the standard teaching materials of an advanced civilization. It was more like some mythological book. It was hard for Luo Nan to not have some doubts in his mind, but he knew that this wasn't the time for him to doubt the authenticity of the information. He could only put all of his mental energy into learning and absorbing during this rare period of opportunity. Things like dispelling the false and retaining the true could be left for later. What he needed to do right now was to strictly follow the drill manual in this highly realistic game scene. He needed to verify the crystallization of thousands of years of war wisdom of the Hongguang star system. The living sinful body formed a low-intensity, short-time contamination under the cover of the jade crystal array. It was possible that it was a young fantasy breed that was born in the sinful poisonous environment. It was also possible that it was a fantasy breed that suffered contamination after it was formed. Regardless of which case it was, the follow-up treatment would be carried out by a specialized department. What Luo Nan needed to do as a maintenance soldier was to find the area that could possibly be contaminated. He needed to clean this area and apply a temporary patch. If he did this well, he would destroy the environment in which the living sinful body grew. This would reduce a lot of trouble for the follow-up work, and vice versa. Over 500 mechanical ants penetrated deep into the secondary passageway of Guan 542. Under the support of Luo Nan's soul strength, their built-in microsensors worked with high efficiency. They automatically transmitted data of the surrounding environment. Luo Nan and Liang Lu formed a standard array calculation module to conduct an in-depth analysis. Right now, Luo Nan needed to support the operation of over 500 mechanical ants. He needed to maintain their detection configuration. He also needed to make fine adjustments based on the results of the analysis. He needed to lock onto an accurate position. In a moment, he needed to guide the jade crystal array's support power according to the real environment to carry out cleaning and repairs. He was multitasking, and all of them were precise operations. It was no wonder that Liang Lu was worried and wanted Luo Nan to stabilize. But Luo Nan didn't feel that it was all that difficult. It wasn't because he had learned the secret technique of overall planning from Dean Wan early on. It was because from his perspective, no matter how complicated the specific details were, the core of the operation was unified from beginning to end. It was just like how the military's tactical and technical manual stated the essence of the sinful poison from the very beginning. Everything was a distortion of the space-time environment and laws. As long as one understood this point, the 10,000 changes would not deviate from the core. In Luo Nan's eyes, the standard array that he and Liang Lu had constructed together, the hundreds of centimeters, the secondary passageway of Guan 542 that was suspected to be polluted, the relay station that extended endlessly along the pipeline tunnel. Of course, this included the multiple overlapping void environments that currently supported this base. All of these were nothing more than configuration frames that were endlessly switched and arranged. But all configurations were orderly in the end. Even if there was some sort of disharmony between these simple and complex, layers upon layers of nested configuration frames that interacted with each other, bringing interference to the instrument's detection, as long as one grasped the basic relationships within, the so-called interference was nothing more than the whirlpools of life and death in the vast ocean. One would be able to grasp the overall direction and deep rules after seeing it many times. Luo Nan was like a fish that naturally knew how to swim when it came to the foundation of his superb level of mental senses and his attainments in configuration. He was most proficient in tossing and turning in this sort of environment. Similarly, he possessed considerable sensitivity toward the external pollution that clearly departed from the essence of a body of water. His keenness was directly reflected in the sensitivity of the scintometers in front of him. An alarm was transmitted back practically the moment the vanguard of the mechanical ant array broke into the relevant area. Liang Lu opened his mouth to speak. Aside from reminding Luo Nan, he was also reporting the progress to the command platform. Guan 542 sequence. Worker B units between 3321 and 3328. Coordinates. The calculation module of the standard array marked the virtual area roughly corresponding to it in a bright red color. Luo Nan followed the drill manual and gave a verbal report. The scintometers are in place. The base number is 528. The requirements are met. The jade crystal array is linked effectively. Beginning segmentation. Several hundred mechanical ants either stuck close to the pipe or hung in midair as soon as his voice fell. Their entire and individual movements froze at the same time. And before they froze, the 528 mechanical ants had already completed the required actions and the arranged configuration frames. They had passed the strict review of the standard design module of the standard array. At the same time, the highest level AI of the relay station, Ant Kuei, responded with a gentle voice by their ears. Application approved. Liang Lu subconsciously swept the relevant timing area, and his eyelids suddenly jumped. He captured a tiny number that was 3 orders of magnitude lower than the basic time. 0.002 of a breath. This wasn't an error. It was the time needed to smooth out the error. Liang Lu didn't even have time to ponder the deeper meaning of this number. The bodies of the 2 people in the special maintenance vehicle trembled. The vast power of the jade crystal array of the relay station swept over them. It was like an electric shock, but it was a kind of synchronized trend in the rules. Luo Nan narrowed his eyes. He liked this kind of trend. Chapter 906. When the power of the jade crystal array passed through the stable link and was added to the configuration array formed by the syntome, Luo Nan's duty as a small maintenance soldier was completed. This sort of low-intensity pollution was probably nothing more than a minor ailment to the relay station. Luo Nan didn't even have the time to carefully observe the living nefarious poison or the specific form of the nefarious poison environment before the polluted area was swept clean and patched. The specialized backup department followed up in a timely manner. They soon arrived and sealed off the scene to carry out follow-up actions. According to the drill manual, not only did Luo Nan and Liang Lu not have the qualifications to participate further, they also had to accept detailed questioning. The degree of detail made it seem as if Luo Nan and Liang Lu had become infected. Liang Lu was quite open-minded about this. Be content with what you have. When the time comes when you don't have the time to do identification work, that would be a huge problem. The war was going well at the beginning of Sin Calamity. A base of 10,000 people was drained to death in an instant. A living sin poison of the great sovereign level escaped, and it was forcefully fed. Who could we go to at that time to reason with? A powerful great sovereign level expert practically stood at the apex of the heavenly Yuan Empire's personal evolution system. Above them were rulers, gods, and other supreme levels. Even though Luo Nan lacked perceptual knowledge of the concept of a great sovereign, Liang Lu's expression was full of emotion. It made people shiver. Liang Lu comforted him in turn. Don't be nervous. The jade crystal array was quite imperfect back then. We fought countless unjust battles. Things aren't like this now. Liang Lu couldn't hold back his words as he spoke. Think about how many founding lords had immortal bodies. At the beginning of the Great Chaos, they fought for millions and millions of light years to return to the ancestral planet. They killed their way through the Star Gate and trampled through the checkpoint. The two sides were clearly looking at each other, but they were forever corrupted by the sin poison. Forget it. Let's not talk about these vexing matters. I'll give you one last piece of information. The early history of sin calamity has the lowest average score among all the literature and history subjects. If you can harden your heart and study it, you'll be able to get a higher score for the specialist examination. Luo Nan's lips twitched as he gave a response. Liang Lu let out a breath and adjusted his mood. He returned to the matter at hand. I say, how did you do it in such a short amount of time? Ha! Over here, look over here. I bet he broke the recruit's record. Luo Nan also glanced at the relevant data. 0.02 of a breath, multiplied by 5, was roughly 10 milliseconds. He didn't think that there was much meaning to this data, so he just let out an, "Oh," and didn't say anything else. Liang Lu maintained his smile, gritted his teeth, and slapped him on the thigh. The superior is asking you a question. Luo Nan just felt that this was ridiculous. Follow the drill manual. Advance information. Once you get close, choose a suitable segmenting structure. Then it's time to test your microcontrol. And don't all the segmenting instruments have automatic adjustment functions? Do you think I've never used a syncopator? As a professional, Liang Lu was not easily fooled. He directly pulled up the maintenance manual and clicked on the relevant entry. What do you mean by choosing a suitable segmentation structure? Do you think I don't know that the automatic adjustment of the segmenting structure needs to be done after manual selection? There are 20 major items and over 400 minor items. Even if the corresponding items in the specific environment can be reduced to 5, there will be 1 or 2 corrections and adjustments in order to pass the inspection of our standard array. There will also be Aunt Kuei's final examination. The time taken will be between 1/10 of a breath to half a breath at the very least. There's an order of magnitude difference, okay? You're basically reaching your goal in one step. You're sticking a pole all the way to the end. It can't be a coincidence, right? Luo Nan blinked. It's that complicated. According to his own logic, the relay station, the pipeline tunnel, the secondary tunnel of Guan 542, and other mechanical constructs were all reflections of some sort of configuration. They were manufactured and solidified by people to solve certain practical problems. However, they were limited by the various laws of the material world. A few undesirable burrs appeared when many aspects were combined. What Luo Nan did was to temporarily smooth out these burrs. Of course, he couldn't forcefully do it. He couldn't do it, but the segmenting apparatus he controlled was truly a good thing. These seemingly fragmented mechanical ants with simple individual structures actually went through the tempering of a classic design. They were able to restore the free space of the configuration design on the mental plane to the greatest limit. What Luo Nan did was to add a few auxiliary lines to the restricted configuration creation within this free design space. He created a few peripherals, temporarily pushing them to a relatively perfect state. He plugged the holes and provided a better environment for the powerful support of the jade crystal array. This was actually similar to the test questions in the 100-year sequence. The conditions and the question were all given. All he needed to do was to clearly think through the question and then write the answer. Oh, actually, he didn't even need to write the answer. This was actually a multiple-choice question. Liang Lu spoke of 20 major items and over 400 minor items. Every item was an extremely classic and exquisite configuration design. It could be widely used in practically all combat scenarios. All the user needed to do was to choose the correct answer from among them. These segmenting configuration designs were simply godly secrets to Luo Nan. He spent a large amount of time to study and memorize them. Even though the amount of time he spent studying them was short and he might not be able to use them freely in the complex combat environment of the wilderness, the difficulty of the questions was greatly simplified in the near-ideal environment of the base. The number of items to choose from were greatly reduced as well. It would be a waste of his life if he couldn't use them well. From Luo Nan's perspective, the scene just now didn't have any interference options. There was only one correct answer. Of course, Luo Nan definitely wouldn't say these words in front of Liang Lu. He also knew that his understanding of configuration was built upon the foundation of countless domain fragments and spacetime structures. He was a bit different from Liang Lu, a top student of orthodox birth. He even far surpassed Liang Lu to a certain degree. But he wasn't willing to stab Liang Lu's self-esteem, even if he was just an NPC in the game. Luo Nan simply shut his mouth and didn't say anything. At the same time, he hoped that the chaos mechanism of the game would display its effect and quickly deceive this plot. For the time being, it was hard to say whether or not the Innerverse simulator heard the operator's request. But the subsequent developments were indeed as Luo Nan wished. Liang Lu originally wanted to continue discussing the efficiency of the segmenting device with Luo Nan, but a call came in at this time. His expression turned a bit heavy when he saw the display. He adjusted his breathing for a moment before choosing to accept the call. He didn't give the other party the chance to speak at all. He spoke in a rapid-fire manner. "Officer Shao, you are an infected member of the nefarious poison. The vicinity of your work area is suspected to be contaminated. According to Article 14 of the Wartime Environmental Control Regulations, you have failed the random inspection. Right now, please immediately hand over your work to the deputy on duty and enter a sealed standby state. Please maintain a stable state of mind. If necessary, inject a sedative." Liang Lu was sluggish for half a second before he could complete his last sentence. In the next instant, even Luo Nan, who was next to him, heard the heavy sound of a wall being smashed on the other side. Liang Lu hung up the call with a dark expression. Luo Nan hesitated for a moment before speaking. "Gongshi." Liang Lu pursed his lips and didn't speak at first. But in the end, his lips twitched under Luo Nan's gaze. "Zhan Shao, this really is troublesome. Are you sure that the nefarious poison's contamination this time is related to Officer Shao? I'd rather believe it. It's better than having a flower bloom in the center in the end. There are far too many lessons in this area. They are far too painful. No one dares to treat it lightly." Liang Lu spoke, then he became a bit fidgety, but without Zhan Shao, the spacetime environment monitor would immediately go limp. This is a very dangerous matter. Right now we're still surrounded. There's no way to send it back. There were many things that Luo Nan didn't quite understand in Liang Lu's words, but it wasn't good to ask right now. He could only try to comfort Liang Lu. "I wonder if there's a way to be promoted to officer." Promoted to officer. Liang Lu wanted to say something, but he cut himself off. In the end, he probably felt that he had lost his composure. He forced himself to reveal a stiff smile. "Forget it. Let's go. There's nothing for us to do here. To tell the truth, we should have gone to borrow the out-of-print all-encompassing camera before we came." Luo Nan went, "Aw." He was a bit disappointed. Of course, it wasn't because of the out-of-print camera. It was because he wanted to go take a look at the scene and understand the true details of the nefarious poison environment. However, Luo Nan couldn't do anything since his superiors had spoken. He could only sulk and start up the specialized maintenance vehicle. He waited for Liang Lu to greet the personnel sealing off the scene before slowly heading back. The vehicle entered an automatic patrol mode. Luo Nan had nothing to do for a time, so he casually grabbed a syncopator from the probing ball and fiddled with it. He pondered over this seemingly simple yet extremely exquisite structure. It was truly a great invention. Aside from the high rate of battle damage, there were practically no flaws. Luo Nan thought that he would definitely make a batch for himself when he got out of the game setting. This toy had a rather vast application space in Earth spacetime, even without the support of the Jade Crystal Array. The moment this thought arose, he pulled out the instruction manual and studied the material composition and related craftsmanship of this little toy. This was all for the sake of reproducing it as completely as possible in Earth spacetime. Liang Lu was endlessly bewildered as he watched from the side. Could this be the reason why Luo Nan chose the ultra-efficient manual? He hesitated for a moment, but in the end, he tossed aside his non-existent face. He also grabbed a syncopator and gathered together with Luo Nan. They studied and discussed, and he did his best to ask for guidance without batting an eyelid. Of course, Luo Nan wouldn't refuse. But before he could say more than a few words, another call came in from Liang Lu's side. This time it was through the mission channel. Liang Lu's figure suddenly straightened in the next second. Colonel promotion. Yes. We'll head back immediately. Luo Nan had already begun to control the vehicle to make a U-turn as he spoke. By the time the call ended, the specialized maintenance vehicle was already speeding along the road they came from. Luo Nan just casually asked, "What's wrong?" Liang Lu's eyebrows jumped. He was a bit puzzled. Colonel Promotion has personally arrived at the scene. He wants to do a replay. Chapter 907. Liang Lu's bewilderment was very normal. This was because on-the-spot review work was not within the scope of Field Officer Xing Zhan's responsibilities. Xing Zhan was the supervisor of 2 Honeycomb. At the same time, he was also the actual person in charge of the logistics department of the relay station. However, the scope of his authority was mainly in the maintenance of infrastructure and equipment, as well as the wartime production, assembly, and maintenance of the dynamo core and other high-precision equipment. Even if it happened within his jurisdiction, there would still be a specialized department that would come over to handle such a highly specialized business like the handling of evil poison. He shouldn't have overstepped his authority to command related work. However, after Liang Lu's initial astonishment, he was unable to pay attention to the deeper reasoning. After receiving Field Officer Xing Zhan's order to personally review the work, Luo Nan couldn't remain calm and collected. This came from the pressure of his profession. Hurry, hurry, hurry. Organize the work records again. They have to be especially concise. The key points should be highlighted. The context should be clear. We absolutely can't waste his time. Luo Nan was a bit stupefied. Liang Lu explained very seriously. Field Officer Xing Zhan was a famous busy man in the relay station. The consequences of wasting his time. Did you see his fist the size of his head? All right, Luo Nan had heard that Field Officer Xing Zhan's professional standards were on the same level as his violent temper. It was under the deterrence of Liang Lu's iron fist that Liang Lu was the one who did the streamlining work, even though he had given the order. These words were more like Liang Lu cheering for himself. Luo Nan was idle the entire way, but it was actually only 100 seconds of time. The high-speed maintenance vehicle had already returned to the place where they were previously stationed. There were a few more people here compared to before they left. The professionals who were responsible for identifying them had now become receptionists. They were pointing out the true coordinates of the incident to the newcomers. However, Field Officer Xing Zhan wasn't among them. The arrival of the specialized maintenance vehicle drew everyone's attention. Luo Nan's eyes were sharp. He saw that there was a person among the group of people who was probably familiar with Liang Lu. He smiled in their direction. The vehicle stopped, and Liang Lu kept his head lowered as he struggled with his work records. He only woke up with a start when Luo Nan poked him. He raised his eyes and saw an old acquaintance in the crowd. He was a bit shocked. He immediately jumped out of the vehicle and greeted the person. "Senior, how come you're here?" Luo Nan still carried out the military bearing and attitude of an outstanding recruit. He got off the car at practically the same time as Liang Lu and stood ramrod straight to the side. That person was still smiling. Even though he couldn't see the work area on the virtual interface, he accurately evaluated Liang Lu's previous work. "You came quite quickly, but I still remember that promotion officers hate meaningless, perfect formalism." Liang Lu rolled his eyes and drawled, "That's why I'm getting out of the car now and having a meaningful chat with Senior." It was obvious that they had a good relationship. Liang Lu didn't forget that this was the first soldier he had ever led in his life. He turned his head and reminded Luo Nan, "Come. Meet our base's assault spearhead, the Empire's war hero, my senior, Lieutenant Lu Andy." On the other side, Lone added in a timely manner, "Group." Luo Nan understood his meaning. Luo Nan was referring to the Empire's war hero, which was a collective honor. It was different from individual merits. Luo Nan's honor had dropped by a notch, but Luo Nan's modest conduct naturally gave rise to a favorable impression. Luo Nan puffed out his chest and stood straight. "Hello, Lieutenant." Liang Lu even specifically introduced Luo Nan to Lieutenant Lu Andy. He imitated the tone of a seasoned veteran. "Luo Nan, my soldier. He's an elite seed of the 100-year sequence. He's a great lad who can accurately control the division structure within 0.02 of a breath." Luo Nan felt that there was a more appropriate evaluation, but he forcefully swallowed it back down, a freak who sacrificed his common sense. Luo Nan laughed again. "You speak as if you could have done it long ago." Liang Lu's white face turned a bit red when he was exposed in an instant. But he had already mentally prepared himself on the road, so he wasn't really angry. Luo Nan was a bit embarrassed, but soon Luo Nan returned the greeting. "Hello, Private." Luo Nan knew that Luo Nan was a middle-aged man with a normal physique. Actually, Luo Nan wasn't too clear on the average lifespan and age of the citizens of the Heavenly Yuan Empire. He just felt that this Lieutenant Lu had a bit of vicissitudes of life. In fact, the first impression was more blunt and direct. This was because one could see that there was an obvious thick scar on Lu An's neck that extended from the collar of his military uniform. It extended from the left side of his neck all the way below the root of his ear on the same side, and then radiated to the area behind his head. The scar was ash-gray in color, seeming to be an old wound. Luo Nan was able to sense that there was a rather dense distribution of metal beneath the scar. At least a third of this person's chest cavity and skull structure was an artificial creation that was implanted after birth. Whether it was visual perception or perception, it was a bit sinister. However, this Lieutenant Lu loved to smile. The corners of his mouth would always curve upwards regardless of whether he was talking or not. There were some fine wrinkles at the corners of his eyes that were highly compatible with his smile. It was precisely this sort of expression and habit that offset the visual impact of his external appearance. It made people feel very naturally that he was an amiable and friendly person. It was just that the originally harmonious structure of his body and mind had been partially destroyed by external injuries. Luo Nan believed that this was a senior with a story behind him. What's more, Luo Nan also saw that this lieutenant's pitch-black uniform had an eye-catching silver armband that didn't conform to the norm. It was a spiral representing the heaven ladder. There was also an even more abstract symbol of 3 nested rings in the middle. Liang Lu had once taught Luo Nan similar points of knowledge. This represented the holder of the armband. Even though this armband didn't fully reach the level of being able to lead an army and be bestowed nobility, or be promoted to the seat developing technique, he had innovated in a certain field, bravely climbed the heaven ladder, and made some breakthroughs. Only then would he obtain this sort of honor. The three nested rings referred to the three crucial steps of furnace formation, technique deployment, and internal refinement, after the completion of the basic internal cultivation. It was also known as the life furnace. It was the most crucial stage in breaking the inherent logic of the genetic inheritance of a race. It was the most crucial stage in breaking free from the innate shackles. This was quite amazing. While Luo Nan was secretly evaluating this person, Liang Lu was exchanging information with Lu Andy, Sr. Did your frontline fierce man come here to steal credit? I obey orders to assist in the investigation. Aside from the open scars, not a single edge could be seen on Lu Andy from top to bottom, from inside to outside. Even though he was speaking seriously, he didn't have too much of an air of doing official business. This sort of appearance really didn't match the title of Assault Vanguard. Liang Lu didn't react in time. He laughed in spite of himself. It's not easy. You guys finally discovered the hardships of us worker bees. Lu Andy maintained his smile. Are you going to let Colonel Xing see you chatting meaningfully in a bit? Lu Andy didn't say anything more. He gestured with his hand, indicating that they could head towards the true location of the incident. Liang Lu finally came to his senses. His expression turned serious, and he gave a salute in sync with Luo Nan. He tossed the specialized maintenance vehicle to the side and turned into the much narrower Guanbi 542 secondary passageway. Luo Nan never thought that he would be able to approach the evil and poisonous environment that he was extremely interested in so quickly. He was quite excited, and his footsteps were light and quick. However, Liang Lu, who was beside Luo Nan, had a load on his mind. He walked more and more sluggish, unconsciously falling behind by more than half a body's length. He muttered to himself, "A lot of people are coming." Luo Nan turned his face in confusion. He didn't understand what Liang Lu meant. I'm saying that it's not just Colonel Xing who's coming to review the situation. Senior is currently the captain of Sir Shi Yuan's personal guard. If he comes, Sir Shi will most likely come as well. Even if Sir Tang doesn't come, Sir Hui will come as well. It won't be easy for Zhang Xiao to pass. During this time, Luo Nan more or less understood the basic division of the ranks of nobles, sergeants, and illustrious nobles in the army. He also roughly understood who the high-level commanders of the relay station were. Right now, he was able to match every name that Liang Lu said. Sir Shi Yuan was a third-class noble, and he served as the commander of the relay station's mobility unit. Although he had less than 1,000 people under his command, and his responsibility was singular, being only responsible for charging and killing on the battlefield, the lowest rank of his subordinates was a third-class sergeant major. All of them were elites picked out of 100. Sir Tang Tong was a second-class Star Lord. She had the highest rank among the 12 illustrious nobles of the relay station. The highest officer of the base was only on par with her. She served as the person in charge of the logistics department. But the concept of logistics was big logistics. In short, she was in charge of everything that had nothing to do with direct combat command. Sir Chang Yihue was a third-class noble, and he served as Sir Tang Tong's assistant. He was also Colonel Xing's immediate superior. However, Xing Zhan was in charge of almost all the technical matters. Most of the specific matters were handled by him. But the department in charge was directly related to today's matter. Jingming Agency. This was a rather awkward name, and it seemed to involve allusions to the Heaven Abyss civilization. Luo Nan had to expend quite a bit of effort to achieve a more accurate translation. From the meaning of the words alone, this was a tranquil and serene administrative organization. To be more precise, it was a central department that wanted to achieve the goal of tranquil and serene. It was aimed at the environment of evil poison, and it was also an organization that specialized in dealing with evil poison. Luo Nan properly straightened out the positions and authority of these big shots, and he finally understood Liang Lu's meaning. They came over to deal with Colonel Xiao. Just like how they dealt with the source of the infection. Deal with the person or deal with the matter? This is the question. Liang Lu's brows were locked tight. Luo Nan's understanding of the situation was far too little. He was unable to make a further analysis. At this moment, they were already very close to the contaminated area that had been patched. Luo Nan had long since seen that there were quite a few people standing in this relatively narrow space. Most of them were operating instruments and equipment. They were busy, but there weren't any big shot-level characters among them. Presumably, they hadn't arrived yet. The one with the highest rank was a young colonel. At the same time, he was also the one with the most leisure time. He leaned against the curved inner wall of the passageway. His back was arched inwardly, looking a bit casual. His face was lowered, making it hard to see his expression clearly. But even so, Luo Nan's first impression of him was that his body was slender and coordinated. He was quite handsome. He was an extremely eye-catching character. However, Luo Nan felt that the silver armband on his upper left arm was even more eye-catching. It was a circle of abstract spirals that represented the stairway to heaven. There was also a pattern of a half-closed eye in the middle. Just as Luo Nan was guessing who it was, Liang Lu stopped in his tracks. Zhan Xiao. The sound waves transmitted through the secondary passageway had quite a few refractions and overlaps. It was muffled and not too clear, but the young colonel was still able to sense it in an instant. He raised his head, and the corner of his lips curled up. Officer Liang Lu, your random detection frequency is a bit high. Chapter 908. Zhan Xiao was indeed a rather handsome person. At the very least, the outline of his facial features was in line with Luo Nan's Earth aesthetic standards. His eyes were brilliant, and the corners of his eyes were slightly raised. Their radiance was sharp. Even though Luo Nan was separated by nearly 20 meters, his piercing gaze was quite penetrative. In comparison, his voice seemed quite muffled within the rapidly refracting tunnel. By the time it reached Luo Nan's side, it was already buzzing. Liang Lu's expression darkened, but he didn't respond immediately. He didn't continue forward either. Instead, he turned on his communicator and conveniently sent Luo Nan into it. He was using a device that could communicate across the entire planet. He was separated by 20 meters, and he was speaking to the target personnel. His words were full of sarcasm. Officer Xiao, a problem can be found with the most basic of random sampling. What do you want me to do? At first glance, it sounded like these two were about to shed all pretense of cordiality when they spoke. However, the curve of Zhan Xiao's lips was even more obvious. He no longer paid attention to any rank. Speaking of which, you might be disappointed. I already made a will when I joined the army. Even if something happens to me, the designated beneficiary of the out-of-print sound source will be Sister Ming. It won't be your turn to have a heartless mouth like you. Liang Lu spat, don't call me Sister Ming. Her Highness may not remember a distant relative like you. Liang Lu immediately became alert after the first sentence was said. Your brain is broken. You're starting to have delusions. Speaking of which, didn't they feed you medicine? Luo Nan watched the two spit at each other from a distance, but he didn't feel too much hostility. It was just as he understood in the past. Liang Lu and Zhan Zhao's friendship was quite deep. Liang Lu's choice to use his communicator wasn't an act of taking off his pants and farting. It must be known that Zhan Zhao's current position was separated from the tunnel by the seemingly busy full-time personnel of the Jingming administration. Unless they forcefully charged through the crowd, they could only spit insults at each other. The personnel of the Jingming administration were quite quiet. They allowed Liang Lu and Zhang Xiao to spit insults at each other. They did what they needed to do. There was practically no reaction. At most, one person came over to Liang Lu and Luo Nan's side to tell them to maintain a safe distance. He also made a mark on the retina interface of the two. Through an effect similar to AR, Luo Nan could clearly see that Zhang Xiao had already drawn a prison. Zhang Zhao's range of activity was limited to a radius of several meters with Zhang Xiao as the center. Zhang Xiao was isolated from the normal world. It was precisely in this situation that Liang Lu lacked the mood to escalate the war of words. He simply introduced Luo Nan to Zhang Xiao, just like how he introduced Luo Nan to Lu Andy. It was still the same elite seed, segmentation and accuracy, and so on. Of course, the most outstanding one was still the my soldiers attribute judgment. Zhang Xiao wasn't as polite as Lu Andy. He just nodded towards Luo Nan. Luo Nan was separated by such a distance. If Luo Nan's eyes and mental senses weren't as good, he would have missed the opportunity. But this person turned around and stabbed Liang Lu in the heart. You have such a poor vocabulary to say the same words twice in a minute. Do you really know how to embarrass our Shoujing Academy? Or is this the only bright spot you have after joining the army? F***ck. It was only then that Liang Lu remembered that Colonel Xiao in front of him had the blood of the royal family flowing in his veins. He was extremely talented in sensing and specialized in such things. Even in the complicated environment of the front line, 100 meters was nothing to him. Obviously, the conversation between them and Lu Andy had been heard by this fellow. Liang Lu wasn't a particularly thick-skinned person to begin with. This time, he choked quite badly and was momentarily speechless. However, Luo Nan felt that it was more likely that Liang Lu had met him halfway. She was worried that Zhang Zhao's words had been heard by the other party, which made it even more awkward. On the other side, Zhang Xiao was unforgiving. He glanced over and said, "Minister Liang Lu, what's with that expression? Do you feel that the evidence is conclusive, so you want to make an early judgment and deal with me before Sir Hui and the others arrive?" Liang Lu wanted to answer, but in the end, he could only curse indiscriminately. Seeing that Liang Lu was completely speechless, Zhang Xiao finally let out some of the pent-up air in his chest. His tone also lowered, and he seemed to be chatting casually. "I don't need you to worry about me." "What's the point of worrying about me? The battlefield is the most unpredictable place to begin with. It's just that there are people like Lone who have a tough life, people like you who never improve, and people like me. What's wrong with you? Did you play out the appraisal, the disposition, and the funeral in your head?" Liang Lu was finally annoyed by Zhang Zhao's words. His emotions surged, and he fiercely spat into the communicator. "You still have the face to talk about Senior Lu? 7 years ago, you evaluated him. Did you judge him correctly? 4 years ago, you wanted to seal the coffin. Did you seal it? Right now, Senior Lu is right outside. If you have the time to spout nonsense, go kowtow to him and worship him as your master. Senior Lu will definitely teach you the ability to lift a coffin." This wave of verbal abuse caused Zhang Zhao's face to turn green. It was to the extent that a few full-time members of the Jingming administration could no longer maintain their neutral calmness. They turned their heads to look. It was as if they were worried that Zhang Xiao would be careless and directly attack his heart with evil poison, contaminating him on the spot. But in the end, Zhang Xiao just pursed his lips and maintained his silence. Luo Nan was confused listening to this part. Liang Lu actually thought of him. He used a rather deliberate tone to converse with Luo Nan. "Oh, Luo Nan. I've never told you about Senior Lu before, right?" Luo Nan could guess a bit about Liang Lu's thoughts, so he played along very obediently. "No. I'm confused. Hee hee. The reason why I solemnly introduced Senior Lu to you just now was so that you could properly get to know a true heroic character. Senior Lu is different from a certain someone. He is one of the most outstanding and legendary graduates of our Shoujing Academy. He is the type of person that the school will specially invite to the school's anniversary celebration. Zhang Xiao just swept his gaze over from afar, but he listened to Liang Lu's flattery and trampling on the weak. Luo Nan honestly played the role of a supporting character. He went, oh. He's a senior alumnus. What senior? He hadn't graduated yet when I entered the school. Even a certain someone is a year older than him. Luo Nan was immediately shocked. He seriously recalled the face of Lieutenant Lu Andy, who was still standing guard outside the passageway. No matter how hard he tried, he was unable to find any evidence that Lieutenant Lu was only 2 years older than the young and inexperienced Liang Lu and 1 year younger than the young and handsome Zhang Xiao. Could it be that he first joined the military, then accumulated merits and advanced his studies? We're schoolmates in the general knowledge stage. After we graduated, a certain someone relied on his family background to enter the military school. Senior Lu directly enlisted in the military, and I stayed in the specialized school for a few years before enlisting in the military this year. Liang Lu eliminated a reasonable option and gave a standard answer at the same time. Senior Lu is only 2 years older than me. I'd believe it even if he was 20. Luo Nan hissed. He didn't need to act, he already had a shocked appearance, no way. That's right. He's 1 year younger than a certain someone. Luo Nan looked at Zhang Zhao's slightly gloomy but still handsome and young face. He clearly knew that Liang Lu had no reason to lie to him, but he still spent some time to adjust his train of thought. Is it because he's injured? Luo Nan thought of Lu Andy as he spoke. There were clear scars on his chest, neck, and face, as well as a large amount of artificial prosthetics. By Earth standards, this level could already be considered an altered human. That's right. You should know about the Ancestral Defense War 4 years ago. Fortunately, Liang Lu was just asking in passing. Then he supplemented, Senior Lu was in the Ancestral Defense Patrol Fleet at the time. He held the position of Sergeant Major. When faced with the alien species that suddenly broke through the realm and entered, the remnants of the fleet were able to defend the ancestral Stargate in a situation where over 70% of the fleet was lost in the first wave. They won over Her Highness to lead the army back to aid them. For this reason, he received the title of the Empire's War Hero. Luo Nan could only nod at this time. As for the alien species that Liang Lu mentioned, Luo Nan had some understanding of it during this time. This referred to a living species that could shuttle back and forth between multiple spacetime environments. They possessed the ability to adapt to multiple spacetime laws. They had varying levels of combat power. The weak were extremely weak, and the strong were extremely strong. But their greatest commonality was that they had extremely high endurance and extremely strong survivability. Some species were simply like locusts in the universe. They were like plagues, causing people to change color just by hearing about them. Even an advanced civilization like the Heavenly Yuan Empire would often view them as a natural disaster during their heyday. In the Light Concealment Galaxy, there were a few alien species that had mutated due to the evil poison. They wandered aimlessly through the complex starry sky environment. Every time they appeared in a star domain inhabited by humans, they would bring about catastrophic destruction. For example, the fantasy breed and their servant army that were besieging the relay station were relatively gentle and respectful. Luo Nan lacked sufficient perceptual knowledge of the ancestral defense war back in the day due to his lack of knowledge. But he was able to understand the degree of desperation of this war purely by reasoning. However, Liang Lu's description said that Luan's legend did not come during the war, but after the war. You saw Senior's appearance. Those are all scars left behind from the war. But you didn't see how he looked when he came down from the battlefield. Half his body and half his head were smashed flat. The Stargate Fortress's jade crystal array was overloaded and shut down. They were on the verge of collapsing in hand-to-hand combat. They fought face-to-face with the alien species, and they were immersed in the evil poison environment. They were even more seriously polluted. They were only a hair's breadth away from a destructive mutation. It can be said that nothing can be saved from those kinds of injuries. Senior was a bit lucky and managed to hang on to his life. But the life furnace that he cultivated bitterly for many years in the army completely collapsed. Add to that the disability of his body. He won't be able to stay in the army. He will be a cripple even if he is discharged. Humph. Luo Nan quickly shot a glance at Zhang Zhao. Zhang Zhao's lips held a sneer, but his gaze was a bit fleeting. Liang Lu was ruthless as well. He stabbed at Zhang Zhao's heart like an invisible knife. How did Senior Lu do it? He recovered his consciousness while he was recuperating. He had the energy to research the theories and methods of internal cultivation and internal refinement. He started from the beginning, deducing and experimenting step by step. He endured the pain of his illness for over 3 years. He risked the risk of genetic collapse at any time and overcame countless difficulties. He published over a dozen professional theses and obtained the Heaven Stairway armlet with a half-crippled body. This was much better than a certain someone who relied on his royal bloodline and his inherited treasured texts to earn glory. And in the end, he started with the external force that was implanted into the dynamo core. He guided the external force into the internal force, causing the furnace to restart and reforge. His cultivation has completely recovered, and he has even made progress. He has returned to the army and is still a great man. Even someone as fierce as Saoirse praises him. Liang Lu's voice grew louder and louder. He had nearly forgotten himself. Right at this moment, a laugh traveled into everyone's ears. Oh my terrible reputation has spread to the 2 beehives. Chapter 909. There was a saying in the heavenly Yuan Empire that could be translated as, the mouth moves, the ears move. On the one hand, it meant that everything that happens is connected. On the other hand, it meant that even the walls have ears. On the other hand, it meant that, speak of the devil and he will appear. Liang Lu's current situation wasn't just that his mouth and ears moved, but that his entire body moved. This was an exaggeration, but his soul was definitely trembling right now. Just as he was getting carried away, the person in charge of the review had already led his subordinates over in a grandiose manner. It had to be said that Liang Lu's earlier analysis was rather accurate. The most eye-catching person in the group was undoubtedly the sturdy giant at the front. It was Shi Yuan, a third-rank noble known as Vicious. He was half a head taller than the 3-meter-tall Colonel Xingzhan, and had practically come in from the top of the passageway. There was no need to mention his ferocious appearance. Even inside the base, he wore a layer of metal armor that extended to his face and seemed to fuse with his flesh. At this moment, a cold light pulsated as he breathed. From his appearance, he wasn't just a vicious person, he was practically a wolf in sheep's clothing. In comparison, Chang Yihue was a third-rank noble who was much more low-key. Although he walked side by side with Sir Shi Yuan, his height only reached Sir Shi Yuan's waist. Perhaps the contrast was too obvious, but he seemed thinner than a normal person. His face was long and narrow, and his eyes were small. However, Liang Lu was even more afraid of this person. It wasn't just because Sir Chang Yihue was the second in command of the logistics department, and was in charge of him. It was also because this person's surname was Chang Yi. Chang Yi was a compound surname, and was the surname of great sovereign Chang Yishuan, the one with the greatest military achievements at the founding of the empire. In the heavenly Yuan Empire, great sovereign Chang Yishuan was also known as the Devil Buster Great Sovereign. Putting aside his great achievements before and after the founding of the nation, in the early days of the era of Sin, during the Dark Age after the fall of the Master of Zhanhe, he dragged his heavily injured body and swept across the Hongguang galaxy in the most violent and poisonous environment. He opened up the most basic living space for the survivors who were on the verge of extinction. In the hundreds of years that followed, he presided over the central area and cut off all the dark hands of the heavenly kingdoms, until he ran out of oil and returned to silence. Even after his death, the inner universe he opened up also transformed into a permanent plane, carrying the most important jade crystal array of the Empire. In the light concealment galaxy, it lit up the flames of survival for the heavenly abyss survivors. The jade of the jade crystal array came from this. It could be said that it was precisely because of great sovereign Chang Yishuan's existence that the heavenly Yuan Empire had been able to survive through the darkest period of turmoil and the most torturous period of talent shortage. Great sovereign Chang Yishuan had played a major role in the heavenly Yuan Empire's survival until now. Thus, the surname Chang Yi had the same status as the imperial Zhan clan. In the base, people called Sir Chang Yihui by his name and not his surname to show respect. The current Chang Yihui was a third-class knight. Of course, he didn't have his ancestors' Devil Buster ability, but as long as the surname Chang Yi was in front of him, it had a natural intimidating power for a young soldier like Liang Lu. Not to mention that Chang Yihui was also in charge of the Dark Calm organization. He presided over the treatment and identification of the sin poison infection. Zhan Zhao's fate today would most likely depend on Chang Yihui's final judgment. At this time, Liang Lu just wanted to lick back the words he spat out earlier. But the reality was that he couldn't do anything. He could only stand together with Luo Nan. He straightened his body, looked straight ahead, and assumed the most standard posture of a soldier. He waited for the reprimand that could come at any time, as well as the follow-up orders. And the reality was that Liang Lu had made the same mistake as Zhan Zhao. He had added too much drama to his mind. These big shots of the base had come over in groups. They absolutely didn't come to reprimand a few pawns. They came for Sir Shi Yuan, who had been called out by name. There was no follow-up after Liang Lu and Luo Nan's words of mockery. The group of people directly passed by Liang Lu and Luo Nan's position and arrived before the area being protected and surveyed by the Dark Calm organization. Colonel Xingzhan, who was a bit behind the two knights, couldn't escape the fate of being a busy person even at this time. He pointed at the air with his finger as he walked. He was most likely dealing with other matters. He didn't even turn his eyes in their direction. Luo Nan and Liang Lu watched helplessly as the group of big shots passed by and were treated as air. Luo Nan and Liang Lu, especially Liang Lu, didn't dare to move an inch until Lu Andy, who was part of the entourage, gave them a look that said, "Follow me." Only then did Luo Nan and Liang Lu quietly turn around and follow the group with their hearts in suspense. At this time, Zhan Zhao was unable to maintain his casual posture. He stood ramrod straight like Liang Lu and Luo Nan, separated by the isolated area. His posture did not change even though the two had been freed from their restraints. Zhan Zhao was one of the mid-level officers of the base, so he had the qualifications to make the big shots look at him in the eye. But his performance just now had more or less caused people to dislike him. Sir Shi Yuan didn't pay attention to him. He just lowered his head and conversed with Sir Chang Yihui. The cold and sinister metal plate on the side of his face faintly warped along with his facial movements. You guys aren't busy enough with logistics. You guys feel sorry for yourselves. You guys do counseling. You guys even have time for psychological treatment. Over at my place, a machine cannon can solve all your problems. If you have the strength to survive, then you can toss and turn after the war. Let alone Zhan Zhao, who was right in front, even Liang Lu, who had just blended into the group, straightened his body. His fair face flushed red once more. As for Luo Nan, he wasn't that sensitive. Or perhaps it could be said that this wasn't the area he was sensitive to. While Zhang Xiao and Liang Lu were feeling ashamed because of Sir Shi Yuan's evaluation, Luo Nan was a bit distracted. The direct reason for his distracted state was because he had followed the group closer to the isolated area where the incident had taken place. As he got closer, some minute details began to give him a faintly discernible stimulation. Luo Nan furrowed his brows. He was separated by layers upon layers of people in front of him, especially by Sir Shi Yuan's broad torso. Luo Nan's gaze and telepathic thoughts were cast in synchrony at the specific location where he had personally cut up. The big shots in the front row were in a different state. Chang Yihue didn't have any expression toward Shi Yuan's ridicule. He just nodded slightly in response. He opened his mouth to speak in the next moment, directly pulling back to the main topic: seize the moment. Let's review the situation. The officer of the Dark Calm administration, who was in charge of handling the scene, responded and stood up to report the situation. They, the members of the mission, all possessed specialized knowledge in this field. They also possessed rich experience in handling situations. How to report, how to find the key points, how to make suggestions, all of these had established procedures. It could be said that they were extremely familiar with it and flowed smoothly without any stumbling. The two knights just listened quietly most of the time. They would occasionally ask a question, and no matter what they heard, their faces didn't change in the slightest. Luo Nan was also within the group listening attentively. Since the reporting personnel of the Dark Calm administration spoke quite a bit of specialized vocabulary, coupled with the problem of the chaos-style translation, Luo Nan could only listen to the general logic. He lacked the ability to comprehend the more practical and crucial data. Because of this, Luo Nan heard half of the report. Luo Nan clearly understood the basic conclusion that Officer Xiao suffered the backlash of the new, Time Fortress structure. Officer Xiao was fully exposed in the twisted and evil environment. Officer Xiao was extremely close to the location of the incident. There was a high probability that he was directly responsible for the light pollution this time. Moreover, similar incidents might occur in the future. Luo Nan no longer bothered to understand the dry and dull data. His mind was completely focused on sensing the target area. As he poured his mind into it, a certain sense of disharmony continued to proliferate and magnify in his space of consciousness, even though he didn't have the amplification of the standard array and lacked the assistance of the equipment. Luo Nan's brows furrowed tighter and tighter. It seemed like before, Luo Nan's emotions and thoughts churned, and his palms suddenly felt pain. He instinctively lowered his head to look and saw that the syncopator, which he had been studying and fiddling with since the beginning of the journey back, had triggered the activation command for some unknown reason. The syncopator had transformed from a chrysalis egg state into a mechanical ant. The sharp edges of the syncopator cut and stabbed fiercely into the tender flesh of Luo Nan's palm. Luo Nan's character in the game scene had basically restored his true cultivation. His fleshly body still had a bit of a foundation. His skin wasn't broken, only a short white scar was left behind. Right now, his flesh was slowly recovering to its normal color. But it was this scar that cut away the slight hesitation that arose in Luo Nan's heart due to his judgment. It allowed him to draw a definite conclusion: this isn't right. It's wrong. Luo Nan's thoughts were practically synchronized. Behind the two knights, Shi Yuan and Chang Yihue, was the broad-shouldered officer Xingzhan. He used the shortest and most direct words to negate the overall results of the reporting officers of the Dark Calm administration. This instantly drew the focus of practically everyone's gazes. If Luo Nan was an ordinary officer, Xingzhan's response would undoubtedly be overstepping his authority and disregarding his superiors. But the problem lay in the fact that he had another identity in addition to his rank as an officer in the military. He was a master in both configuration and technique deployment. He could be promoted to the position of a master. In the Heavenly Yuan Empire, this was an illustrious position comparable to that of a second-class Star Lord. In the military, academic status would certainly give way to military rank. But in a domain like sinful poison, which required profound spacetime configuration theory and technical support, even the highest officer of the relay station, Sir Yan Chi-Chu, would have to listen to Officer Xingzhan's opinion with an open mind. Needless to say, whether it was Chang Yihue or Shi Yuan, they actually had a bit of tacit understanding and preparation in their hearts. Chang Yihue's face remained calm and collected. He just leaned slightly to the side and spoke with a relatively gentle tone. If you have any opinions, Officer Xingzhan can raise them. Xingzhan did not speak immediately. Instead, he used his thick fingers to light up one projection area after another in the air. It was like a demonstration board in a classroom. Looking at it, it was filled with densely packed formulas, numbers, and extremely complicated diagrams and sections. More than half of the people who came over were Sir Shi Yuan's guards. They were used to fighting on the battlefield and rolling on the front line. The moment they saw the cold structure of numbers, they felt like they had been kicked back to the dark time before the general education exam. They were panicking, breathless, and dizzy. They did not feel good at all. Only a few people, such as Luanda, showed great interest in these display boards. More people were looking at each other. Was this master's demeanor going to give a long speech? In this slight restlessness, Xingzhan lit up the final projection. It was surprisingly refreshing. It was just a standard timer interface. The precision was relatively high, and it could be accurate to 10,000ths of the basic time. Xingzhan confirmed the time through this interface as 2,136 seconds. As soon as his voice fell, a dazzling red light and an alarm came at the same time. Chapter 9-10. Nefarious poison contamination, low intensity. Many people didn't even need to look at the display to roughly guess the meaning of the alarm. The overall atmosphere of the team fluctuated slightly. Some people whispered to each other, but overall, it was not as chaotic as when Colonel Xingzhan arranged the teaching display board. After all, everyone was already used to it. In the frontline bases that were engulfed in the flames of war and people were dying all the time, how could they expect the air to be clean and dust-free? Luo Nan was the most unaccustomed to this. According to the drill manual he had learned, he should be dealing with it now. However, no one moved at all, including the professionals from the Ming establishment. Everybody's eyes were wandering on the teaching board and the faces of the big shots, trying to find the key to the current situation. It must be said that Luo Nan already had a grasp of the situation and judgment in his mind. His understanding of the situation had already surpassed the vast majority of people present. Unfortunately, he was limited by his pitiful mathematical knowledge. Of course, there was a gap in the overall knowledge structure. Looking at these display boards was like reading a book from heaven. Even the most blunt inference method could not find any logical clues from them. For a moment, he was extremely vexed. On the other hand, Liang Lu, who was next to Luo Nan, was awakened from his stupefied state by this wave of alarm. He was barely able to shake off the shame of receiving a bad evaluation. He was unable to calm his heart and observe the display board for the time being. In his days, he only received the most stimulating information from the outside world. He even subconsciously looked for Luo Nan to converse. This alarm sounds familiar, Luo Nan grunted softly. His gaze struggled free from the display board. He shifted his gaze along with Liang Lu to point at the alarm device. It was a piece of detection equipment placed beside the isolated area by the Netherworld Agency. Its working principle was the same as the detection module on the specialized maintenance vehicle, and the basic conclusion it obtained at this moment didn't seem to be any different. Really? Liang Lu was horrified. This area had clearly already been handled by him and Luo Nan. However, the warning this time was so similar that it was as if they had gone back in time. Didn't that mean that their previous work didn't work? Liang Lu's little heart skipped a beat. He turned his head to look at Luo Nan, but his scalp went numb before he could make eye contact with Luo Nan. He subconsciously turned his head, and he just so happened to meet Xingzhan's large, bloodshot eyes. Liang Lu's heart was flustered, and his reaction was also wooden. Fortunately, Xingzhan only swept a glance over him, and Liang Lu didn't even catch the focus of his gaze. Then, Xingzhan said, "It's still the worker bee area 3321 to 3328, the low permeability type. The standard operation is divided into 17-05. The log shows that the last operation of Central Dimension 2 Patrol is in line with the program. The so-called Central Yenwei Patrol 2 was the abbreviation for the Central Pipeline and Safety Partition Area Extension Department Maintenance Post Patrol 2. In other words, it referred to the two people, Liang Lu and Luo Nan." In Xingzhan's mouth, the work log that Liang Lu had painstakingly organized was skipped over by this sentence. As for the more detailed part, it would probably occupy an inconspicuous corner of the complex data model that was currently ascending and descending. It might even be just one of the series of basic data. Even so, Liang Lu was very satisfied. No matter how small the positive feedback was, it was still positive. The impact of the negative reviews from before quietly dissipated a little. Luo Nan, who was next to him, could hear Luo Nan clearly. However, Luo Nan didn't pay too much attention to Liang Lu's mental state. He just stared blankly as he looked at the dense arrangement of teaching boards at the front of the line. He looked at the flashing and refreshing formulas, numbers, and graphics. Even if he could understand them, not 1 out of 100 could understand them. Liang Lu's whisper entered his ear. That person finally began to collect his mind and study this series of highly difficult mathematical models. He soon discovered an extraordinary situation. It's constantly refreshing. It wasn't just Liang Lu. Some other people who could vaguely make out what was going on found out one after another that the teaching exhibition board, which was already extremely complicated to begin with, was constantly being refreshed. Every piece of content was being refreshed at a different frequency. Each model seemed to be performing real-time calculations to mark out a certain type of rule changes. At this time, one could guess that there was certainly some sort of hidden yet unrevealed linkage logic between each board. The vast majority of people had already given up upon realizing this point. There were also some professionals who were extremely interested in this. They didn't want to give up, and they cast their gazes one after another toward Xingzhan, who had lit up these teaching boards. They hoped that this person possessed a deep foundation in theory. He also possessed the demeanor of a master who had rich experience in teaching. He could dispel their doubts. They were destined to be disappointed. Obviously, Xingzhan didn't think that the current environment was the kind of classroom where he could explain the profound in simple terms. He didn't have the intention of giving a long lecture, including this series of demonstrations. He didn't expect most people to understand. It was enough as long as the two knights who had decision-making power could understand. The two knights had indeed understood the key information. Shi Yuan's gaze lingered on the most conspicuous timing interface in the center. He briefly summarized, periodic changes. Xingzhan confirmed, even if we deal with it now, it will appear again in 2 to 3 minutes. It should be the multiple elemental linkage of the new spacetime fortress architecture. Of course, it also includes the increase and decrease of entropy within this near-closed system. Chang Yihui thought a little more and immediately asked, where does this rhythm of evolution come from? The rules of the evil environment shouldn't reflect obvious regularity. Here. Xingzhan's finger pointed at the projection area on the left of the timer interface. The formula and numbers displayed on this projection did not seem much different from the other display boards. However, in the eyes of those who knew the ropes, it represented a very special meaning. The vast majority of the people in the surroundings could not understand it. Those who could understand it had more or less a change in expression. Luo Nan heard Liang Lu's extremely low inhalation of air between his lips and teeth before it was forcefully cut off. Shi Yuan and Chang Yihui's expressions were also very serious. Chang Yihui's duty was the most suitable to express his position. He didn't delay and spoke a few seconds later. I'll immediately report the relevant situation to Sir Tang. Given the current situation, I believe that everyone should meet to exchange opinions and respond to the following problems in a timely manner. The metal plate on Shi Yuan's cheek seemed to have frozen into his flesh. He didn't speak any further. He just nodded silently. Xingzhan clenched his fist after the two knights reached a consensus. The densely packed display boards directly returned to nothingness, severing the last hope of certain people to listen to the lecture. Xingzhan spoke to Chang Yihui at this time. We might need to make some major adjustments in the maintenance and repair work. Pull out some people. Chang Yihui declined to comment. He just said, we'll talk after we meet. Then he turned around and left with quick steps. The troops behind him split apart, forming a passageway for the few big shots to leave. A personal guard like Lu Andy naturally had to leave with Shi Yuan. Before he left, he even gestured to Liang Lu, Luo Nan, and Zhan Xiao, who had inexplicably gone from being the center of attention to being ignored. It could be considered a farewell. However, Luo Nan was able to see that a layer of haze had faintly accumulated on the peak of this mature and steady officer's brows. Even his candid smile was unable to conceal it. Soon, the two knights and their entourage left without a trace. Luo Nan turned around and looked at the contaminated area that was beginning to be treated. So far, he could be considered to have come into close contact with the evil and poisonous environment. He felt the chaotic yet moving towards chaos, the internal irritation yet no obvious internal friction. But was he infected by Liang Lu with this inexplicable sense of familiarity? And at this time, Luo Nan heard Liang Lu murmur, "This is really bad." Luo Nan nodded, "It really is bad." Liang Lu was startled. He raised his head to look at Luo Nan. "You know that model. Do you learn it in the general level?" If it's the one that Officer Xingzhan was referring to, then no. Luo Nan denied it. He really didn't know what the model was, but he followed his own logic in deducing forward. He picked out the details bit by bit, cross-verified them, and eliminated the correct options. The final remaining link, no matter how absurd it seemed in common sense, was definitely problematic. After experiencing the evil and poisonous environment up close, Luo Nan was able to deduce it from a more fundamental configuration theory. He had the confidence to conclude that he had executed the entire process from the discovery of the contaminated area to the cutting process. His judgment was accurate, and there were no mistakes at all. There were no problems with the link he led. Then the problem was not with the part that belonged to him. Yes, Luo Nan was referring to the blessing of cleaning and patching after the cutting process was completed. The problem was the jade crystal array. Liang Lu was unable to grasp Luo Nan's reasoning for a time, but he didn't have the mood to delve into it. In reality, he just had a deep impression of the data model of the jade crystal array. He forcefully guessed it from the words and actions of Officer Xingzhan and the others. His train of thought was far from being clear. His train of thought was simply cut off by Luo Nan's interruption. He circled back. "What's going on? Is it a malfunction, or?" "It's the contamination." The one who spoke was Zhan Xiao. And right now, he was surrounded by the members of the Jingming agency. He crossed the quarantine area and walked to the vicinity of Luo Nan and Liang Lu. Perhaps it was the opposite of what happened when things reached an extreme. This member of the imperial family had suffered from a bad evaluation and neglect within a short few minutes. Not only did he not collapse, but he seemed to have calmed down quite a bit. Of course, this didn't mean that he was free. He still had to go to the relevant department to undergo a series of tests and inquiries. The surrounding personnel were simply monitoring and escorting him. Jean Zhao's footsteps didn't stop. He didn't even turn his head when he spoke his second sentence. I only understood what that fellow did after Officer Xing pointed it out. He twisted the sewage pipe and the drinking water pipe together. Jean Zhao's analogy wasn't accurate, but it was helpful in understanding. Liang Lu, who was originally confused, vaguely understood. He was even more astonished. Does he want to be court-martialed with this godly operation? I don't know if he'll be court-martialed or not, but everyone knows that the next few days are bound to be terrible. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.